Good evening and welcome to our January 29th budget meeting. Just kindly rise and join us in the Thank you. First thing is, if the public comment, if anybody would like to address the council about this evening, feel free to step to the mic. Seeing no one coming, I'll move on. First thing we have is proposed issuance of debt, and I think we have none.
We have to take it off the table from last meeting,
Thank you,
please.
yes. Motion by Nancy Harrington, second by Nancy Murphy. All those in favor of the motion to take it off the table signify by saying aye. Aye, oppose or abstain, 7-0-0. All right.
Yep.
Paul?
We do not have any issuance of debt. We thought we might get something. However, those plans have fell through. So as of this moment, we do not have any issuance of debt. We have another bite at the apple on February 13th. That is when the public hearing will be for the budget. Town Council's budget will hold a public hearing on February 13th. Want to let people who are listening, petition warrant articles are due February 9th, 5 o'clock in the town manager's office. If it's a money article, meaning that it's related to the budget, you need 25 signatures. If it is anything else, you need at least 50 signatures, and then the council has 60 days to hold a public hearing. Or if you want it to go directly on the ballot, 500 signatures will go directly on the ballot. If you're planning on doing a petition bond, the deadline is February. Trying to back out 4 days.
Ninth?
It's the 3rd. Yeah, it would be on there. It's the Friday before, it's 7th, February 7th is petition bonds. How could I forget that day? That was supposed to be my birthday. Supposed to be. Supposed to be. Yeah, February 7th. So petition bonds are Friday, February 7th at 5 o'clock if there's a petition bond. So there's no issuance of debt. So I do have a little bit of a presentation for the council tonight that goes through a bunch of things. I know there was a lot of questions that the town council had during the budget process. Would I, if we're okay to move on to the next topic of review of capital reserve funds?
Yep. Perfect.
Okay. So the review of the capital reserve funds, these are not all our capital reserve funds in the town of Merrimack, but these are the ones that I am asking the council to fund and the residents to fund for next year. Thank you, Nick. So, as you can see, there was an estimated 2025-26. That is what I put forward when looking at, when I put the budget forward in December. I have since looked at some of the capital reserve funds, and you'll see a proposed column for 25-26. And some of the changes that I've made that are different is athletic fields. I reduced that back down to $5,000. I reduced the Daniel Webster Highway capital reserve back down to 75, from $80,000 to $75,000. I reduced the playground equipment down back to $5,000. I left solid waste, I left fire, and I left GIS. I reduced that to 15, I left it at 15. And I reduced road infrastructure capital reserve from 825 to 800. So what I'm asking the council for is $2.4 million worth of capital reserves that will be voted on in a separate warrant article. Actually, $2,410,000 will be voted on in a separate warrant article. And that's a $160,000 increase. It's a $40,000 savings from what I estimated in December. Sewer infrastructure, which is also voted on in a separate warrant article, with increasing that to $600,000, and the sewer infrastructure is paid by user fees, so it does not affect the tax rate. Overall, the increase would be $250,000 worth of deposits going into capital reserve funds that we save for the future. Of that, 160 would be the increase on your tax rate, which is roughly 3 cents. So there is a 2-cent savings, a 1 cent savings, $40,000 savings that I will be proposing later on this evening if the council so chooses to make that cut. Reason why fire equipment is at $50,000 increase, as we know, it's costing us a lot more money for our fire trucks. What cost us $650,000 4 years ago, now it's costing us $875,000 almost for the same truck. Case in point, we bought the ladder truck for $1.5 million. When it arrived this year, it took 3 years to build. When it arrived this year, it was worth $2.2 million. So just the increase in the cost of manufacturing the trucks and the cost of engines because of the new emissions on the engines raised the price for those vehicles. The other one that I increased is solid waste. Once again, $185,000 from $100,000. That's due to needing a new tractor. That's what hauls to the landfills. And the one that we have is an International. What year is that, Chris? It's an 05. What is that, about 400? About 400,000 miles on it. So it's getting a little long in the tooth. So we're looking to get a new tractor for pulling our trash trailers up to the transfer station. And of course, we over the summer we heard just the increases in bridge construction. Just here alone on Wire Road and the bridge over by the MYA building, how much that's increased over the years. So we just had to increase that. This week, I got an email from the state DOT estimation for the two bridges, Babuzik Lake Road and Wire Road, coming in at about $11.5 million. So the cost of a bridge has gone up significantly. Considering we did the Turkey Hill Road Bridge, which was a major bridge years ago, I think almost 15 years ago, for $4 million. Now you're looking at bridges for $11 million. So it's definitely going up in price. It was very confusing the way he wrote it. The gentleman from DOT wrote it, so I don't know if it's 11.4 for both bridges or $11 million for each bridge. I would rather say it's $11.4 million for both the bridges, but I don't know. We'll find out when they go out to bid, but that came through just this week. So that is why I'm asking for some of these increases in the capital reserve funds, and when we can decrease capital reserves such as the ambulance and computers and highway equipment and the library maintenance fund, we do take advantage of reducing the next year if we have to.
Is our 20% covered on these bridge projects?
That's why I'm increasing it, so we do have it
We'll get
covered.
there?
We'll have it. That bridge is 25, 26? Yeah, we'll have it because that's over a number of years. That bridge isn't going to be built in one fiscal year. It'll probably be over 2. So we'll have our 20% coverage. And plus, they'll be reimbursing us. That's the other thing with Bridge Aid, is that they let you do all the architect engineer work up front. You pay 100% of the cost. And then once the project construction starts, they reimburse you your 80%. So we'll have some of that money coming back into the fund as well.
Anybody have any questions? All right.
Okay, thank you. Moving right along. Discussion of fund balance. So earlier this fall, we talked about increasing the media, the franchise fee from 3.75 to 5%. Council at that time said no. Media is more than just cable TV now. So if we have to pick it up in the general fund, we'll pick it up in the general fund. I'm paraphrasing. Of course, you didn't say it that way. So I want to run you through what the fund balance for media is. In 1920, we started out with a fund balance of $555,000. As you can see, our franchise fees in 1920 and 2021 were 133 and 134. That is because we used $250,000 in 21-22. We used $200,000 to offset taxes. So that drew down the fund balance from $555,000 to $183,000. In 22-23, we let all the franchise fees go directly to the cable fund, and we collected about $387,000. Last year we collected $366, 392. We're projecting in 24-25, and then of course we flatlined it in 25-26. We're planning on running the fund balance, keep on continuing to use fund balance to help offset the cost of the budget for media. At the end of 25-26, I'm estimating about $130,000, $131,000. I feel that we probably will have a 2-year run out. So 26-27 will be covered. Probably in 27-28, we might have to start using some of the general fund to help offset the cost of the media fund. And then in 28-29, it will be back on the tax rate as well. So that's the media fund balance run out. General fund balance. The easiest way to talk about this is that the council has made it their goal to use roughly around $1 million of fund balance to offset taxes, just for tax relief. And you'll see that it's 948, 942, 984, 1,084, 984, and $1 million. So the town council has made an effort to use about $1 million of fund balance to help offset the tax rate. Discussing how and why we should use a significant amount of the money and use it the same amount over years is because the town council has made an effort to not have what I like to call the EKG tax rate, by dumping a ton of money out of fund balance to offset the tax rate one year, and then the tax rate spikes the next year because you do not have it. So the town council has made a conservative effort to try to run their fund balance, use their fund balance to, number one, offset taxes. The other thing that though was a concerted effort is that we used it for major projects that are one-time projects. For instance, in 23-24, we used $1.4 million of fund balance to do the fuel distribution system in the town of Merrimack. If we would have brought that onto the tax rate, that could have been a 15-cent increase of the tax rate, and then in 24-25 would have been a 15-cent drop. So that's where what I call the EKG, you spike and then you'll go down. So we made a concerted effort to start using for capital improvements throughout town, which is the fund balance policy that the town council also has. It says you can use it to offset taxes and you can use it for funding equipment and one-time purchases. So that's what we're doing with the fund balance. As you can see, we started at 8.99%. We have a warrant article that was passed years ago that says the fund balance should be between 4 and 8%. It's advisory to the town council. The town council takes that advisory warrant article seriously and has worked hard to try to get the fund balance underneath that 8%. If all goes well this year and we hit our numbers for appropriations and revenues, we'll be at 7.75%. So we'll be underneath that 8% from the 8.99 that was in 2021. Next year, we're using $200,000 for the master plan. That will bring us down to 6.95%. Still, we'll have $7.8 million of fund balance in the fund. However, there are some commitments that might be coming due that will use a significant portion of that $7.7 million if they come due. We're just waiting to see when or if they'll come due. So, but that's $7.7 million, and you'll see our total tax commitment, including the school, is over $100 million. So having $7 million, and this $7 million is specifically for a rainy day. If one of our major taxpayers do not pay their tax bill, that's what this $7.7 million is for, to help us be able to continue funding and having money to pay bills until that taxpayer pays their tax bill. Not saying that it has happened in the past, but we have had some taxpayers that owed a significant amount of money through tax deeding and everything else that when it ran out, we took a couple of years to get our money back, but if we didn't have this fund balance, operations might stop. So, that's one of the reasons why you use it. I believe that the town council has done a great job in taking their fund balance and this fund balance amount seriously, and has I'm trying to choose my words carefully here. I wish that other organizations would think of this as well, to try to make a concerted effort so that we don't get those EKG tax rates, and really look at fund balance and use fund balance in the proper way, and move forward, and not blowing the horn for the town council, but I will. I think that we came up with a plan, and this was when Eileen was here, of how to use fund balance, and I think the town council's pretty much stuck to that plan. And some years, as you'll see, they've given more money back for tax relief. In other years, not so much. But there's always been a plan. We use it for the 53rd week payroll. A couple of years from now, probably every 5 to 7 years, we have a 53rd week payroll. It's going to come up again, and that's $325,000 is one payroll, 1 week's worth of payroll. If you have fund balance, you can take it out of that. You don't get that spike that 1 year and then the drop the following year. So I'll answer any questions about fund balance that the council may have at this point.
Anything? It's going to be an easy night, Paul.
Move budget to, and I apologize, I didn't get the motions, but when we get to that point of moving stuff, we'll work on the motions together. We talked about in the budget, now we're moving into the budget discussions. This moves into the town council deliberations. We talked about payback, buying a 1-ton pickup truck versus using a contract plow truck. It's real. I did it as simple as possible. The truck cost in the budget $65,000. If we had to increase overtime, gas maintenance for us doing plowing in-house, I estimate that would be about $16,000. Excuse me. Savings from the snowplow contract that's in the budget, I believe it was $55,000. So the total savings was almost $39,000, just over $39,000. Payback is about under 2 years. That's a pretty good payback.
It's a no-brainer.
To just reducing the savings of the plow. Dawn and her staff have a year to kind of figure out all the nuances and overtime and who's going to be working and not working, but to have our lots plowed. And I know people saying, wow, $55,000 for a snowplow contract. That's 24/7. Because I have 2 operations that operate 24/7, police and fire. So the parking lots have to be clear because the fire and ambulances have to get out and not get stuck in the parking lot, and the police officers have to be able to get in and get out of that building as well. So that's 24-hour coverage from 2 inches of a snowstorm until it ends. So that's why it's $55,000. We think we can do that internally. We believe there's about 25 snowstorms a year. Duration averages between 12 and 16 hours of plowing. Last night's storm, I think the snow stopped around 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning, but they started around 1 or 2, so they were in at 2 o'clock, and they plowed that storm and then the rest of today, cleaning up and everything else. And that was not, that was 2 or 3 inches. So you got to figure we got 181 miles, center lane miles, so there's a lot of roads that need to be plowed. So, but that's the building and grounds truck. Any questions on that?
Yeah, Peter.
Paul, so reading this, what's your opinion? Which way do you think we should go with that?
You'll see. I'm saying we're going to plow it in-house. At the very end, I'll make all my suggestions to the town council like I have done in years past. But that's one of my suggestions would be to remove the contract plow of $55,000 for this year.
I'll wait till the end next time.
Okay, no problem. I have other things that I would like to talk about too. So then I was asked to show overtime. We've talked a lot about overtime. And the green and purple on your screen are COVID years. So COVID started basically at the end of 2019. It ramped up first, I believe, March 17th, 2020. The state shut its doors down, and then we were in COVID status. So really, COVID lasted the full 2021, and then we were still in COVID protocols in 21 and 22 as well, meaning that if you didn't feel well, you stayed home. We didn't want people coming to work sick. So we were really in COVID protocols for 3 years, the green, the purple, and the blue. And as you can see, what the overtime did in those years. We've talked about several times about their overtime. And you can see that last year they were up over $1 million in overtime. There was some staffing shortages that contributed to that, as well as gentlemen out on workers' comp and short-term disability, which also contributed to that. They ran for most of the year to 11. There were a couple of months where they had to drop back to 10 last year because the savings in salary dollars in their overtime budget, but they did not overspend their budget. So then I broke it down so you could see police, communications, highway, solid waste, wastewater. Police, communications, highway, and wastewater, they are up from years prior. For instance, police department, they were pretty constant through COVID. After COVID, police department got hit with some vacancies, and they utilized overtime to keep the streets of Merrimack safe and save the personal service dollars from those vacancies. And that's where they're getting their savings to spend their overtime money over the budget. Talking to the police chief and the deputy police chief, we have an overtime money in the budget. We feel that comfortable with that number because we've been running so many years with so many vacancies, between 4 and 5 vacancies. We believe that right now, until we can get 100% or pretty close to 100% in the police department staffed, the overtime is going to be overspent. However, we know that there's going to be some salary savings on the back end to cover those overtime costs. So we're comfortable with the number and the overtime budget there. Communications, the same thing. We had some vacancies. They offset the vacancies with overtime. Highway had a spike last in 22, 23. We budget $112,000 for highway overtime for snowstorms. That year we had significant snow, and we had some vacancies, so that attributed to them spending over $122,000 from their $112,000 budget. And then solid waste. Thing about solid waste is this drove me crazy for years, and I'm like, how is solid waste overtime so high? We're budgeting it. Well, then it hit me. Every time I bring somebody from the highway department to work at solid waste on Saturday, it's overtime. Because solid waste works Tuesday through Saturday. Highway works Monday through Friday. So if they have to work Saturday, they're in overtime status. So that's why the overtime in solid waste is high. We've been adjusting that each year, trying to bring it up closer to what the actual is. Once again, talking to Chris and Don, we feel that the number in the budget is sufficient for the overtime.
Can I ask a question on that slide?
This one?
On the previous slide, yeah, please. So this last year they spent, I don't know, $475.
Yeah, roughly.
But is it accurate to say this year in the budget, what I'm tracking is $351? So the expectation is that police is going to come back down?
Paul, what were the numbers that we have through December?
I just had the fire. I
You
can
said
look-
the fire? Okay,
yeah.
we don't have police. Yeah, our expectations, the numbers will come down a little bit. We filled a couple of vacancies. We have a couple candidates in the pipeline. We also have a retirement, and I guess I'll say this now. John Dudash, with 31 years of service to the town of Merrimack's retiring Friday, January 31st. He has 29 years as a full-time police officer. He spent 2 years as a special police officer. His whole career was as a patrolman. We wish John the best. But to answer your question, yeah, we're figuring that should come down a little bit this year because we have filled some of the vacancies.
Paul, if I may, I have the November number. For police, they were 55% of budget spent through November 30th, and supervisory was
Yeah.
at 32%.
So yeah, so you'll be coming down.
And in this budget, we're looking at 350, and we think that's sufficient, so.
We think, yeah, because we have, if they're filling shifts, we'll have the savings because they're not gonna fill a shift if they have the patrol, people on the street.
Thank you.
And then this is the last slide. It just breaks down general government, equipment maintenance, building and grounds, and all other. That shows, the COVID years, expensive. Overtime in general government, the COVID years, the green and purple. Building and ground, equipment maintenance had shortages in staffing. And, when you have a fleet of a couple hundred cars and they all have to be inspected either in March or September, you got to work the overtime to do it. And when you're plowing snow and if there's a snowstorm, which as you saw with the highway department in that same year, they were high. When equipment breaks, you got to fix it or else you don't have a plow truck on the road. So it's not like we have 2 or 3 spare 6-wheel dump trucks. Every 6-wheel dump truck we had during a snowstorm is out there being utilized to plow snow. So one goes down, got to get it fixed as soon as possible. And then building and grounds, once again, COVID years, they were really high and they started to come down, and now they're starting to come back up a little bit, but that's because of we were short-staffed as well in those years. So that's the overtime. In your packets that I handed out, I gave you another overtime sheet that breaks out supervisory overtime and laborers, police officers, and firefighters. It's basically the same thing, but it's breaking it out by individual accounts.
Okay, does anybody have anything?
Okay. Moving on. So I was asked to look at tax rates. Now, comparing tax rates is very difficult because there's a lot of factors that goes into the tax rate. As you'll see, there's a couple of communities that are on the same cycle as Merrimack when we look at valuations. One of them is Salem. And Bedford and Amherst and Londonderry, they're on a different cycle than us. And you'll see that as we go through some of these slides. The point that I want to make, I chose these 10 communities: Bedford, Londonderry, Merrimack, Amherst, Hudson, Derry, Salem, Rochester, Goffstown, and Dover to compare. For Bedford, Londonderry, Merrimack, Hudson, Derry, Salem, Rochester, and Dover, we're all about the same assessed value. We're all between 2.7 and 4.6. Londonderry's on a different cycle, so that's why they're higher than us in 2020. But as you'll see, as we get our revaluation, we pick up to 4.9. The reason why I chose Amherst and Goffstown is because they're our neighbors. Amherst is right up the street from us, and Goffstown is just a stone's throw away, 15-minute drive. So those are why I chose those two towns. But the big takeaway on all these slides, as you'll see, is I highlighted Merrimack in yellow. The municipal tax rate is the third lowest out of these 10 communities. And the other thing is, if you look at total tax commitment, we're all about the same except for Amherst, Hudson, and Goffstown. The rest of us are about the same with our tax commitment. Rochester is a little bit less than us, but they're underneath the tax cap. So they can only increase their rate of their tax rate so much per year underneath their tax rate. And but we're the third lowest municipal tax rate. In 2020, we were at $5.06. In 2021, we were the second lowest tax rate at $3.82. And you'll see another pattern. Bedford is the lowest. And they have very similar tax commitment to us. But municipality, we're within cents of them. In 2022, we were at $3.86. And in 2023, we were at $4.05. Both Bedford and Londonderry did a revaluation in 2023. That's why their tax rate jumped down.
No, that was us in 2021.
21 was ours. We're expecting 2026. In 2024, we did $4.29. We were still the third lowest. Then I said, okay, what happens if these municipalities do not increase their tax rate at all? Where will we be if we, what I'm projecting, a $4.63 tax rate for the municipality, where would we be? We'd be the fourth lowest. So we're still on the low end for the municipal services in the town. And our commitment in the town of Merrimack, a total tax commitment is $102 million. Bedford is at 97. Londonderry is at 101. Derry's at 104. Salem's at 116. Dover's at 115. We're all pretty similar with our tax commitments. And we are between the second and third lowest consistently, depending on when we do our revaluations, because we're not all on the same page. I think that speaks volumes for a municipality. And we all run the same services. We all run ambulance. We all run solid waste. We all run our highway. So it's not like some of these towns don't have it, that we don't have. You know, you look at Amherst, they're at $4.71 for their municipal tax rate, and they're smaller than the town of Merrimack employee-wise. We have almost 206 full-time employees in the town of Merrimack for $4.29. Granted, 20 of those employees are wastewater, so we're at 186 employees, but for $4.29 for 24, and for $4.63 projected for 25.
Everybody got their questions answered? Yeah,
Okay?
all right.
This is when we go and present our budgets. This is some of the stuff that we're going to need to have. Fire staffing. I was asked to bring fire staffing. What would happen if we staffed to 12? So I did a firefighter AEMT. That's between a firefighter EMT and a paramedic. It's right in the middle of the road, so I took that position. It cost out about $112,000 a year for next year. If we add one position to 12, that means we'd have to add 4 positions for a total of about $450,000. Well, looking at dropping down overtime to 11, we'd only save about $31,000 from what we're projecting in the budget. It'd be about $560,000 for overtime expenses, and the cost we have in the budget is about $592,000. So it'd be at $31,000. A cost to the town of $415,000 or 8 cents on the tax rate. Going to 12, dropping to 11. I said, okay, what happens if we drop to 10? Because that was another question. We'd save $137,371 or a cost to the town of $309,329 or 6 cents on the tax rate. Everybody follow me so far?
Just to make sure, both of these first 2 scenarios is staffing to 12. The first one being drop to 11 if somebody's out. The second one is drop to 10 if 2 people are out.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Then I said, okay, we don't hire the 12. We just have 11 and we drop to 10. What would that save us? about $56,000, $57,000 in the budget, or 1 cent. And then I said, okay, what happens if we just staff to 11 all the time? And there's an adjustment that needs to be made to the budget of $47,450 of an increase, and that would increase the budget by 1%. So I have a solution for the council to think of. Ambulance fees. 70% of my calls, fire calls, are ambulance, around 70%, give or take. Right now, this is 2024 data. I don't have the 25 data yet. But in 2024, PLS emergency base rate was $448 for Medicare. The average bundle Comstar sees of the top 50 providers they bill for, they bill out that same service at $1,694. Merrimack, we bill it out at $643. We do Medicare plus 50%. If we increase Medicare to Medicare plus 75%, it'd be $784. If we do Medicare plus 100%, meaning double down on Medicare, it'd be $896. And if we do Medicare plus 150, it'd be $1,119 or $1,120. Still way below the average top 50 bundled by Comstar bills. Yes,
Would you explain a little bit more, what does that average Comstar top 50 mean?
that means they have hundreds of clients, and they take their top 50 billings that they bill out for BLS emergency base rate, and they average that out amongst those top 50 billers, cost-wise.
So that could be municipalities, but also private.
If they use Comstar,
Ambulances.
yeah.
Okay.
And it's 338% of the BLS rate. I'm not saying we're going to go up to 338%. I know that other communities just to the north of us, their rates are higher than Merrimack's. A gentleman took a ride in an ambulance, and we would charge about $1,000, $1,100. The service for the north of us, which is a municipal ambulance service, charged $2,600 for the same ride, because we didn't have an ambulance available to bring them on time, and then we had an ambulance to bring them, and the difference in bills he showed me was 11 versus 26. So other communities do have it. In looking at this, our current budget for ambulance revenues is $1.2 million. If we increase Medicare plus 75%, I'm estimating another $200,000. I know there's going to be write-offs, and I don't have the numbers of how many Medicare bills did we send out versus how many private insurers versus how many non-insured people. I also don't have the information that I've been trying to get, how many Merrimack people got billed versus how many non-Merrimack people got billed. I don't want to even give you a number, but with all that, the town of Merrimack let me explain how we do our billing. We take the individual to the hospital. We give our codes. Comstar bills. Comstar bills the insurance company. Insurance company pays. If there's a balance, if they're not a Medicare, but there's a regular health insurance 80/20 deductible, they'll send that bill to the town of Merrimack, or they'll try to collect, and then they'll send that bill to the town of Merrimack. Town of Merrimack will send out 3 invoices, 2 letters to the individual saying, hey, if this is a hardship, please fill out this form. Let us review your form. If this is a hardship, please fill out this form. If nobody sends any information back to us, we have a woman in finance who will then go to court and ask to get collected in court. We'll get a court date. We'll bring them to court. Same thing. We'll say if the judge will say, did you take the ambulance ride? Did you sign for the ambulance ride? They'll say yes. Judge will say, is there a hardship? If there's no hardship, they have to pay the balance. If there is a hardship, we discuss it with them. If it's a hardship and it's significant where welfare reviews all our hardships, whether it's ambulance, anything we have that's a hardship, somebody's asking for relief of a bill, welfare will review it except for the tax exemptions. So they'll go through and they'll look at it and say, recommend to write off balance, or not recommend to write off the balance, or, hey, out of that $1,000 balance, they can pay $250, so you can collect $250 at $25 for the next 10 months. So we have avenues that if people cannot afford the ambulance ride, we can write it off. And that's what I took into account when I did the Medicare plus 75, Medicare plus 100, Medicare plus 150. I did not take the full amount, because if I took the full amount to the 100, you would see $1.2 million. I wrote that back down, saying we're going to have 30% write-off of our bills, estimating. Even if it was half that, even if it was 50% collection, that's still $600,000, Medicare plus 100. The insurance companies have a rate. They try to negotiate with you on the rate. We do not have any contracts with any insurance companies. So we don't have a contract with Blue Cross Blue Shield, Harvard Pilgrim. This is our bill. This is what happens. And then if there's a deductible, it comes in, this people are supposed to pay their deductible to the town. That's part of having a deductible plan. We have employees that have deductibles when they take an ambulance ride. We have it in our personnel policy that if you're an employee of the town, you don't get charged for taking an ambulance ride. Well, if it goes towards their deductible, we don't charge them. So there are avenues in town to help. If the people do not have the means, they can request a waiver. And there's been waivers that people said they don't have the means, but when they go through welfare and they do the looking at the mean for food and stamps and rent and all that, there's times where it's denied. No, you have the means to pay the bill. So if the council's wants, they could increase ambulance revenues to help offset any one of those scenarios before that they're looking at, if they're inclined to do that.
Who's first? You, Peter?
Yeah, Paul, I know we've discussed it in the past, and I guess sometimes, I guess, we're talking for the average person, sitting in a room today, what insurance, I guess I'm not really up on, how much would insurance cover for the average person, not a senior citizen on Medicaid, on an ambulance ride?
I am going to turn to one of my experts. See, he was already coming up to the mic. He knew what I was talking about.
He's prepared.
He's prepared. He has done this in other communities as well. You want to sit next to me? I showered today.
I want you to be in your own spotlight. We talked about the spotlight today earlier.
Yeah.
So to the best of my understanding on how it works, depending upon your insurance provider, as you know, there are myriads of plans, correct? So you'd have to really look at what your plan is. So if you have the average plan, which most of us have, you wouldn't get charged any more than your deductible, because and everybody's deductible is different. So whatever that is, that's what you're responsible for. Anything more than that, you don't pay any more than that. Your insurance company takes care of the rest of the bill. So it doesn't really matter at the end of the day, to keep it simple. It doesn't really matter what we bill. We can bill as much as we want. The insurance company's going to pay whatever they're supposed to. You as a client would pay the deductible. Kind of like if you ever had to have a stay in a hospital. The rates for the hospital stays are outrageously expensive. You don't see that bill. You get your deductible. And once you reach your deductible maximum, you don't pay any more for that particular insurance provider year. When that year expires, it resets and you have to do that all over again. Does that make sense?
It does, but Paul just said that we don't have any deals with any private insurance companies. So if that's the case, and the insurance companies, I don't know if they all have the same acceptable amount, the level that they'll pay for people who do agree to their contracts, but let's say they're all on the same number. If we ignore that, that it's not just their deductible, it's the pile of money on top of that as well, because they don't, you know, if the insurance companies will allow $1,000 for the ride, and we charge, you know, $1,600, they're paying the difference, not just their deductible, but everything else above that. Is that not correct?
That part of the equation I'm not clear on, to be honest with you. It gets a little fuzzy, and I apologize, I'm not more clear on it. The rules in here in New Hampshire are a little different than from Massachusetts, and I'm doing my best to get educated as best as I can, but I don't believe that's how it works. The insurance companies obviously want to create contracts with us, so it keeps all of the rates low. Most all of the municipal providers do not enter into those types of agreements because it's not advantageous for us as a provider. They don't pay us enough to run the ambulance and recoup our costs because obviously, like everybody else, they want to keep the money in their pockets. So none of us have signed up for any of those types of agreements. It's not, again, it's not advantageous. If it was, we'd all be doing it. So I don't think that because we don't have a contract with any of the insurance providers that offer those opportunities, that we would lose any of the revenues. And I don't think it would turn over to be part of the payment for the provider or the insured. I don't know that for sure. I could certainly look into that, but I'm not aware of that.
Because if we don't have agreements with them and we charge whatever we feel is appropriate, it seems to me that they would be obligated to that difference.
It's kind of like a dental bill.
Yeah, those all stink. I know that. So anyhow, I have two potentials. I think that one, I need a better understanding because the way I understand it, it doesn't matter what the deductible is for the insured, because they're gonna pay whatever it is versus what the insurance will pay out to the town. And that balance difference, the difference rather, is, I think, the obligation of the patient. The other thing I have a problem with is, if I understand it correctly, if you're Medicare, like me, 3 years ago, I had to bite the bullet and get on the government dole. I believe that this amount allowed by Medicare, that's what I'm obligated to.
That's what we get paid, and the rest
And then,
gets,
and if I don't have a supplemental plan, I'm obligated to that 20%, or is that just the amount? The $447 for the BLS emergency-based rate?
they give us the amount of money, and I know Medicaid, we can't balance bill. Medicare, we'd have to look at that more, but it's been a long time since I got into the rates. We can find that out for you in about 10 minutes.
In about 10 minutes, you said?
Yeah.
Oh, that's,
Are you saying that, if I'm understanding correctly, the $447 is what Medicare allows for an ambulance
That's the Medicare rate, yes.
reimbursement?
Yeah.
Okay.
and I'm wondering, is that the 80% of the Medicare covers and the 20% is the patient's obligation unless they buy secondary insurance?
I had that same question.
And I'll tell you the reason I'm concerned is because I don't think it's fair for people like me who broke the 65 mark that I get the free ride for the excess, but private insured people, I think, are obligated beyond their deductible. And if we could find that out, that'd be helpful for me, because I just want to make sure it's fair to everybody in the community. If it's outside, I mean, I feel sorry for them, but it doesn't matter as much to me as our own residents of Merrimack. And so I just need I need a better understanding.
And like I said, I hate to say this came bright for this brain, the light bulb went off around 3 o'clock this afternoon, and I try to gather as much information as possible with it. We can get more information.
Andy?
I mean, I think this is a good discussion to have. I think we should flesh this out. But I don't want to lose sight of the overtime budget. And this really isn't the solution to what and I don't know how the rest of the council feels, but I think the overtime costs are growing at an unsustainable rate. And if I go back to pre-COVID, and, I ran some numbers today, and I did 3% inflation from pre-COVID numbers to today, we should be looking somewhere in the mid-700s. Looking at the budget we just looked at, we're over $1 million. So I personally think this is a conversation, ambulance rates, that we need to have. It's one of the council's goals to increase our revenues. But I don't I don't think this replaces the conversation that we need to have on overtime. That's my personal opinion. If everybody else is satisfied with overtime in the budget, then, you know, I'll shut up and color and we'll move on. But I particularly, I'm not satisfied with where we're at.
And I'm not bringing this forward to skirt that. I'm bringing it forward to give you, the council, an option if you wanted to go to 12. This is an option to help so that you're not putting 8 cents on the tax rate. You're offsetting those 4 gentlemen with increasing your ambulance fee. That's the option that I'm bringing
No,
forward.
I think this is a good conversation. We need to have this conversation regardless of what we decide with overtime.
I agree with you, Andy. I think that's a great point. Peter?
A couple things. Paul, first, thanks. I appreciate you presenting us with options, and I agree, we need to have further discussion, because I've still got a slew of questions regarding it. I'm curious, and I agree with Andy, the overtime, I looked at the overtime and the growth, and I agree, it's unsustainable, and I don't know, you know, where's it gonna be in 5 years? But the other issue is, Chief, I'm curious is, what are the conditions in which we would say, or which ambulance rides aren't covered? You know, are there certain situations where the average person may take an ambulance and they could be looked at and said, we're not paying for that? Are you familiar with what some of those situations?
I don't think I understand the question. If somebody calls for an ambulance, we're gonna go, and if they need transport, we will transport them. If there's a hardship like the town manager described, they have every opportunity to present their hardship issue to the town for them to consider whatever decision they want to go forward with.
Because I'm familiar with a situation on one occasion where an individual called for help on a mental health issue, and he was given a ride to the hospital. It wasn't an IEA, it was a voluntary ride, and subsequently, that wasn't covered. And so I'm curious, are there other situations, and maybe that's a question to ask the insurance company and not yourself.
Yeah, I'm not clear. If someone were to take an ambulance transport as needed for a medical condition, there are certainly many opportunities where the insurance company denies the claim. Our billing agent will do their best to resubmit that claim because maybe they're missing information or they punched in the wrong code for the particular services that were provided. Most times it's resolved between the billing company and the insurance company. There are probably some rare occasions where it's not resolved and it didn't meet the criteria for the insurance company to bill. And if they do get the whole bill, obviously there's a reason why, and they can certainly apply for hardship consideration, and maybe that bill does get reduced or nullified or however it would go going forward. But it sounds like a lot of people may not take that opportunity, given their hardship situation, to at least ask for help. And maybe a lot of people are, again, a lot of us are very prideful. I'm not going to ask for help. I'm going to try and take care of this on my own. Sometimes we all know we need to ask for help. And there is a lot of help out there, so some people just don't take advantage of it.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
And out of this whole conversation, I do want to let the residents know, if you need an ambulance ride and you're in that serious condition, please call. We can always work out the billing on the back end. If you're in need to go to the hospital, please call. We will take you to the hospital and we will figure out the billing on the back end. You know, and that is the major thing. If you need us, we're here. Don't think, oh my God, I can't afford the bill. If you need to go, go.
Good message.
Yeah, good message.
That's what I'm looking at.
If you give me 1 second.
Yeah, Paul?
So from our Deputy Finance Director, Medicare pays approximately 40%. We write off 40%, and the remaining 20% is billed to secondary insurance or the patient.
So in this case, of the difference between the say 800, let's use round numbers. Say the $300 difference for Medicare plus 75 and that, so they'll pay this, they'll pay the 447, the difference of the 300, we'll write off 40%, so we'll write off 120. And then the remaining balance will balance bill to the patient. And then if they're in the hardship, we'll write that off, roughly.
Does that answer your question?
I think. But I think Andy's correct, and this is an important topic to figure out.
More detail.
and I hate to drop it on you on the last night. And once again, revenues aren't due with the budget when we go to deliberative session and we go to the ballot box. But it's always nice to have that number of your tax rate is $4.63, or in this case, you know, you do nothing, it's $4.63. If you do something, it could be XYZ is 4 cents. It could be $4.59. So, but we can have these discussions. We do have a public hearing coming up on the 13th. We can try to get this information available and have that discussion on the 13th with the town council as well. Once again, it's not going to affect the warrant or the appropriation side of the House, which is voted on at the warrant, a deliberative session, and the vote on April 8th. But it does affect, because we'll have to have these numbers by September for the following year.
All
But
right.
it's something that we can look forward to. If the council looked at me and said, don't even bother, we wouldn't, but it sounds like the council's interested in getting some more questions answered.
I personally would, and I would recommend anybody, and I'm sure
Is your
tonight,
microphone on?
tomorrow, we'll have questions. And I think if we have the questions, we should forward them to you
Yes,
so that you can have the information when we meet again.
correct.
Whether it be scenarios or coming up with specific questions, give you time to look into it, even look into find out insurance policies that may or may not. Is it true? What happens with deductible and the
Right.
cost? So that would provide you enough time to be able to get the answers, so when we deliberate this in finality, then we'll have all the facts to consider.
Yeah, yeah, and if, the sooner you can get me the questions, the better off we'll be.
Yeah.
On the issues. We try our best, and we do kind of, if they come in the day before, we try our best to get to them, but
It's better if you
with
have more
this is
time.
we're dealing with a third party, so we might not get the answers as quickly as if we had the information.
And maybe
in-house.
that will provide you more time to get the data regarding in-town, out-of-town, that kind of thing,
Mhm,
from the,
mhm.
from ComStar.
Yeah. But,
Because that might make a difference to you.
Mhm.
okay, and I believe, I'll check with the attorneys, but I believe that you can't charge one rate for residents and one rate for out of
Oh, no, no.
residents on this. I
That,
think
yeah,
that
that's
is
not what I'm
legit.
suggesting. It's the use.
Okay,
I-
I'm not sure why, but okay.
I think, like I said, I have to
think
double
that's
check,
accurate.
but before, when we talked about resident rate versus non-resident rate, I think
I think, I remember
they said that, something of that sort. You can always ask them. It's not like I don't talk to them once a week lately, so, on that. All right, so I'm
Thank
ready
you.
to continue.
Well, can we go back to the firefighter scenarios? I don't think we made a decision on there or gave any different direction. So I think as it stands right now, you know, we're still, right now, the direction is staff to 11, use overtime if somebody's out, and continue to 11 at all times. We've seen what that policy got us. It got us over $1 million in overtime cost.
I think personally, I don't, you didn't get an answer right away, but I'm thinking it's got to be a bit more creative. I've talked about staffing differently on our overnight when it comes to overtime. And I think that, you know, the chief's graphs that he gave us the other night didn't tell me what we had for overlap. I mean, during the day, it's not uncommon to see two ambulances head in two different directions within a half hour, 20 minutes even of time. So there's a lot of multiple runs going on during the day in particular. I don't know that that works the same way at night. I suspect it doesn't. And it's not that there won't be a potential of a big thing, but you're not, you know, duplicates. And I'm not going to say it's never going to happen, because it's just, nothing can be in the world of perfection in this kind of thing. But I think that we have to be a bit more creative about it.
I mean, at least for me, you know, and we've said this going along, that, hey, you know, staff to 11 as your overtime budget allows. And that has been pushed to maximum as much as they can. And we've said along, you need to manage that overtime budget. You need to start dropping staffing down, save some of that overtime budget for later in the fiscal year. But we didn't do that. We spent through the entire budget, and then at the end of the fiscal year, we were forced to drop down to 10 because there was no more overtime budget. Personally, if I was king for a day, I would say the guidance has changed. We're gonna staff to 11, we're gonna drop to 10. You can use overtime to staff up to 10, but the direction is if somebody's out, we're gonna drop to 10. And see what that does. I'm still bothered by the sick time. Paul has gave me a bunch of raw data. Obviously, it's all on paper, so it's gonna be time consuming. I don't know if I'll ever get to it, but I'm still bothered by that. Personally, for me, if I was king, I would say we're gonna drop to 10 for a while and see what that does to overtime run rate and sick time run rate.
So in that regard, I did do some other, looking at station coverage and workers' comp / short-term disability coverage. Average over the last 3 years is 1.6 individuals or firefighters out for you have two different groupings. You have your supervisor grouping, which is a different grouping, so you take them out of the mix. So you have 9 firefighters, paramedics, AEMTs, and EMTs. So you have 9 of those. Of those 9, for the last 3 years, it's been averaging 1.6 people out per day. So that is significant. That includes vacancies that we did have, and we do have.
When you say per day, is that the 24-hour shift?
It's a 24-hour shift. It comes out to about 1.9 people, 1.6 people per day. So it's vacancies, it's workers' comp, it's people taking time off. So, looking at that, that is one of the reasons why we have went through so much overtime. This year, we've had some vacancies. We had a gentleman or two that have been out on workers' comp for a significant amount of time. So, in looking at it over the last 3 years, though, it's basically you're filling a 24-hour shift every day of every day of the year, and then 3/4 of a year you're filling in the second position.
Pete?
Go ahead.
And kind of following up on that, Paul, but more, it's kind of, I see station coverage, and I'm curious how that works and how it affects the overtime. When, are we still, I know at one point, and maybe I'm still thinking old school, but when all the firefighters are called out and they're on calls, do we have people come in for station coverage?
We call that emergency callback.
Okay,
That is a different account.
yep,
That is the 700 hours that you'll see on this screen.
okay,
That's what we budget for emergency callbacks.
okay. And I guess,
Station coverage is covering vacation, sick, personal time, vacancies, worker comp issues, short-term disability individuals. That's what we consider station coverage.
okay, so, and again, I could be, again, I don't know the details of it, so if the firefighters are called out and you have our shifters on a couple different calls, a tone for station coverage goes out?
Yep, emergency callback, yeah.
And how many firefighters potentially come in? And I guess I'm curious is how long they're paid for when they come in?
So that's not a standard answer that I can give you. As you know, not many Merrimack firefighters live in town anymore. So depending upon the shift, those that live in town would probably come back more often than those that live out of town. They may not come back as often. So that's a variable number that I don't have an answer for. The minimum recall, I believe, is an hour, and then it's half-hour increments after that, depending upon how long they need to stay.
So, I'm sorry, say that again, Chief?
So if they come back on a recall,
Yep.
they get paid a minimum of an hour.
Okay,
If it goes over that first hour, then it's broken down into half-hour increments.
okay, all right, thank you.
And last year, for instance, there was around 400 hours of callback that we paid for. Because we do break out overtime, so it's not as we're guessing at this, we have codes for station coverage, sick coverage, meaning workers' comp, short-term disability, and then emergency callback coverage. So we do have those numbers, and that's how we can kind of try to put numbers into these categories. We do have a project line, we have training line for overtime, so it's very detailed that what we can break out. We started that about 4 or 5 years ago, I believe. I believe Councilor Harrington, Vice Chairman Harrington asked for that information. So we started tracking it back then, maybe a little longer than that. So we do have this stuff broken out, and that's where you'll see the 150 for projects, the EMT certifications. We have those numbers.
I don't remember the specifics, but I remember Eileen coming up with, she had a driver that used to come in. You remember, instead of an overtime?
Yes, that was during COVID. We had a gentleman take the car to the scene to assess the scene during COVID, and so we weren't exposing a whole crew.
Right, I
We'd
remember
have
that.
one individual go out in a car, assess the scene, and then say, yep, bring the ambulance. The ambulance would be staged,
Right.
and then they'd be, yep, come on in, we're good, or nope, stay away.
But
This
that's not
definitely
what I
covered.
know what you're saying, but that's not what I mean.
We had a,
We had a position that was not a firefighter
Oh,
position
I
per
know which one you're
se, but
talking
it was a driver.
Yeah.
Did you- Okay.
yes, call EMS. The call EMS, we used to have a call EMS paramedic, call EMS AEMT, and a call EMS EMT. Usually the call EMT would be the driver of the ambulance.
Right.
Currently, we only have 2 individuals in the call division for EMT. One is the paramedic, which you heard that we're trying to make them the EMS coordinator, thank you. And the other one is an AEMT.
But they were not,
They were part-time individuals that would be on call, they would sign up for shifts, and they'd come into shifts and they would be.
but their
there.
cost was cheaper
Yes,
because they didn't have the,
overtime. I mean,
benefits
not the overtime, but
and
the
the, and the rate
benefits.
was different.
Yes, yes, the pay rate was different. They didn't have retirement, and they didn't have the rest of
Do
the
we
benefits.
do that at all anymore?
We only have 2 individuals in that program right now.
But do we use them?
We use those 2 individuals, but that's it.
But when are those individuals used? Chief? Because I believe that's what was used for, instead of overtime. When they dropped down, they would pull in that person
Yeah, that,
to drive. Now, they didn't have the capabilities of like a master firefighter, but it was,
yeah, they
it
would
did
drive in the ambulance,
provide
right.
support, and the cost was much less in terms of
And I
overtime.
believe at that time when we started that, we had like maybe 10 in the call division, but now we're down to 2. But the chief can
Yeah.
answer
Yes,
that
Chief.
question.
Yeah, and I hate this, usually the town manager is accurate with everything he speaks on, however, he's a little off with this one.
Okay.
So there's 2 different categories. We have per diem employees, which is the 2 people that he's speaking about, and then we had the call division, which is where the call firefighters and the call EMS providers used to be. A few years ago, just before I got here, the call division for the town has pretty much been depleted. There aren't any more call people left on the department. So back in the day, you probably remember the ambulance squad here in town. People would go to people's houses, the ambulance would show up, and then everybody would help out, and then someone would drive, or however that works. That's been gone for quite a number of years. So that doesn't really help us at all. And I think I spoke before when we talked about reestablishing a call division. The investment it would take is not worth the benefit that you would get on the other end. You've now moved to a more professional, and I don't want to use the term professional in the wrong way, a more career-orientated organization, where we have full-time staff to manage all of the calls that come in. That's where you're at today. So to go backwards is not really the right decision, given the volunteerism just isn't the same as it used to be back in the day. And that's countrywide. It's not unique to Merrimack.
Nor
Everybody
to
in,
fire.
everybody in the country is having a tough time trying to find
Agreed.
volunteers to do that type of a job.
So, but per diem, however.
So the
would
per
have
diem
the
staff-
same-
The
would have
per
the
diem ones are
same
the ones that they
financial,
used.
and might even meet the criteria.
So the per
do
diem
the
staff,
job.
since I've been here, and again, I would need more information, just like you, has historically only worked days. to
Days?
supplement the extra work needed during the daytime so that we could have more staff available on fire apparatus. Because one of those positions would fill the ambulance, the firefighter that would normally be on the ambulance would then move to a fire piece of equipment. So that it supplemented the
Okay.
department in that mechanism. Nighttime, I don't know for sure, I'd have to do the research, but I don't know if we've ever had any per diems that worked overnights.
We've had a couple per diems work overnight, but that stopped a while ago. What you're talking about was the per diem. I use call.
Was per
They were
diem.
per diem.
Okay, now
Now
we
we're
only
adding.
have two.
Now we only have two.
Why, do we have two because that's all we can get, or that's only the positions we have, or what?
Those are the last two people that we've had. We've never advertised to increase the per diem workforce. I'm not sure there's a benefit to that. I've spoken to the town manager a number of times, and if that was something that needed to be cut out of the budget, while it helps, it doesn't help that dramatically.
But they are.
I'm not
ones.
sure I agree with you.
Okay.
And I'm caught between you're the expert and you know more than I do.
I have
And-
information that you, yeah, I understand.
I understand. But it's better than having nobody there. If a decision were made, for example, and I'm not suggesting this, I'm being the devil's advocate. If the decision was made to staff to 11, drop down to 10, and then replace everything after that, would it not be better to say, but you could use that per diem position? So it would be 10 and a half.
So if the per diems didn't exist and we staffed the way we normally staff, each of the positions on a piece of apparatus are assigned a specific job function. So even though they arrive on the ambulance, they are assigned firefighting duties
Right.
to arrive. Now, if we put a per diem person on that ambulance,
Right.
they're not trained to the same level that we are. We'd have to,
Agreed.
quote, train them up.
Agreed.
And then at some point, if they're trained to the same level as a career person, well, I guess I'll just be honest about it. Well, why wouldn't they get paid the same? If you're asking for the same level of training and certification for a per diem person, well, why wouldn't they get paid the same rate as a career person? So that's where I say I don't see a savings. If we need them to do the same job functions, it should be the same rates of pay for the same work that you're asking an employee to provide.
Do we do that now?
No. No. I'm not
So
saying
the
that's
argument-
right.
Oh,
but-
I understand. So the argument goes both ways.
Yeah.
Right. I just think it's an option. Would it involve realigning the process of methodology you have for assignments? If you had someone come in and say, okay, they can only do this, that would mean you'd have to reconfigure everybody else, because that person would be limited in terms of their capacity. I understand that. But would that be better than being down a whole person?
To be
I don't
honest,
know.
I'd have to work out the job functions and duties of what we'd want to have on the fireground at any given moment. So I'd have to work that out
Right.
to see what that would look like.
I'm just saying it would be better than not have a person at all.
If-
So you're saying 11 to 10 per diem, let's consider them a half, because
But
they
if they
can't
can
do
only-
half of the
Yeah,
job.
but if they can only do the EMS function, they can't help me on the fireground. But if I train them up to be on the fireground as a firefighting force person,
Yeah, I know.
yeah, it's,
I understand.
Peter?
Chief, if the fire department went away from, and I know there's a lot of things that have to happen, but went away from a 1 and 3 schedule and went to a different type of schedule, I don't know, there's probably a million
Pe-
different types of schedules.
Peter,
Yep.
that's a contractual issue.
Contract.
Oh,
We
okay.
have to deal with that during the contractual terms. We're
I
not
was
going to
just
be able to
talking in
change that.
terms of,
We're not going to be able to change that in next year's budget.
yeah.
When they come due in June of 2026, then we can talk about that with the
Contractual,
next contract. But right now, it's a contractual issue that they're on
Understood, my bad.
24, 3 days off. Sorry.
No, understood.
You got saved. Not that you could have answered anyway.
Can we go back to the staffing to 12 scenarios? So that would be adding one person per shift.
Correct.
And I'm not clear on, does that lower the overtime budget?
It does, but not significantly.
When you say not significantly, like how much or how percentage-wise? Or
$31,000 to drop to 11. If you add 12
Oh,
to
okay,
drop
I
to
see.
11, that's that scenario. And what that does is, if you look at the station coverage line, 7,849, I took out 2,184 hours out of that line.
And are you confident in those numbers that that's where it would be?
I'm as confident as those numbers are. Yes, am I confident in the numbers? Yes, I am. I run the same scenario for the fire officers. In the last 3 years, the fire officers were $28,000 over on their overtime, 8,000 and 10,000. So to me, that's pretty much a wash because I got guys coming and going all the time. You know, the last 3 years, we had some changeover in our officers, so we had some vacancies that we were covering as well. So I feel pretty confident. It's the same formula I've been using since 2008-9 with it and on the overtime. It's just, like I said at the last meeting, I'm starting to understand why they overspent their budget now. And it's basically because of the open position and because of the 1.6 per shift vacancy that they've been covering. So that's how I figured, when I did that, I never figured into the equation the vacancy on the overtime portion. But looking at what they had for vacancies and the cost savings that we got from above, that's kind of why some of the money that, off of my projections. And I ran another scenario today, and I took out chief gave me a different spreadsheet, used the numbers that I had. I took out the fill station coverage for vacancies, and I'm within $15,000 of my estimate for the year on overtime. So I'm very comfortable with these numbers for that 7,849 number for station coverage. Not to say that it blows up tomorrow if everybody takes all their sick time and vacation time. That's a factor that in years past. I've been running this scenario going back to 2008-9, and I do the full average of sick leave used, vacation accrued, personal time, 100% of personal time. I do the full, since 8-9, I do 10-year, and I do a 5-year. And the numbers are very, very close to the full spectrum. Because over those times, you'll have the ebbs and flows of sick and other things that occur at the time. And I've always told the chief on the overtime numbers, and I don't have the number right now for December for fire. I've always told the chief the worker comp, those are out of his control. He can't control workers' comp. If some guy gets hurt at work, he can control why they got hurt, but he can't control they're out. And we're working with the chief to change some of our work comp protocols to try to get the guys back to work sooner. But once again, if they do come back to work, it's usually on light duty. And if they're on light duty, they're not put in full service. So they're just an extra body in the administration staff to get stuff done. They're not on a truck. They're not running job if they're on light duty. However, they're back at work a little bit and trying to get them back to full duty. So I've always said that, even with Chief Courier, I always said to Chief Courier, those are on the town manager, and Eileen agreed that those accounts would be on the town manager. So, but at $65,000, we'd find it other ways in the budget.
So let's say someone who's on workers' comp comes back and they're partial.
Yeah,
Would they be considered part of the 12 or 11? I mean, 11 or 10?
they would not, because they're not fully activated,
Okay,
functional.
that was my question.
to be-
Okay.
Unless their light duty
Well, that's what I'm saying.
allows them to be able to drive a vehicle or to do some work. Usually it'd just be the driver. But if he's at a fire scene and the guy's on light duty and he can't pick up a hose or attach a hose, he might, I don't
So do you count them or not?
you wouldn't count them because you'd never know if they could do anything, so it's up to the chief, but I say no.
Typically, light duty means they can't perform all of the job functions on the fireground. And if I put someone on light duty, even if they were to, quote, drive, and an emergency situation happened and they couldn't perform, the liability that the department and the town would get, well, why was that person there to begin with? If they couldn't perform all of the job functions, they shouldn't have been put in that position.
So you
So
don't count them?
I don't count them as part of
Okay.
the working force
I
for the
agree
day.
with that, yeah.
They would still be at 10.
Because functionally, they are a 10.
Functionally, they are at 10. We'd still drop down, but that cost I would cover. And I've covered that cost for years.
Nancy?
Thank you. Just a question regarding time off. Excuse me, sorry. Are vacation time and personal days, is it just all one group and you take them as you need, or are there, you know,
There's specific buckets.
there are specific buckets? My next question would be, based on, I'm just thinking from years of nursing and working in a hospital and that kind of stuff, if we knew we were going to be down staff, like, and I wanted to take a personal day, I would not be allowed to take that personal day if it was going to impact the staffing in the unit because we needed to do whatever. Is that something that is,
Contractually, they're allowed, and I don't have the contract in front of me,
okay,
but contractually for personal time, I believe they're allowed so many hours before a shift to call in and just say, I'm taking a personal day.
okay, thank you.
And they get, each individual gets 72 hours of personal time. Vacation's a little different. There are 3 rounds, we went over this today in the office, and there are 3 rounds where gentlemen can come forward and request vacation time, and then they can the second round, they can request, if their days are covered, they can request vacation time, and then there's a 3rd round of vacation time, and then after that, it's a first come, first served basis. And there are staffing, is the staffing in the contract, Cheryl?
The number to be out for vacation.
Yep, the number to be out for vacations is in the contract. So if 2 gentlemen are out, 2 firefighters, not gentlemen, 2 firefighters are out on vacation that day, a 3rd one can't call in and say, I'm taking a vacation day.
Can you take a personal day?
Or sick,
2 vacations.
Or
and
sick.
personal.
or sick, yeah.
And potentially 1.6 sick days.
Well, it's 1.6 everything. That includes vacation, personal time, and everything. 1.6 individuals.
So if we went to 12, we'd still be down average 0.6 per day.
Yeah, roughly.
Okay. So looking at kind of tax impact for the 12, drop to 11, that's 8 cents, correct?
That would be an 8-cent increase on the tax rate,
So
yes.
say the average house is 500,000, that's around $40 per home for a year.
Yeah, yes, our average house in Merrimack's like 370 and change.
Right, because we're at 77.
So, come on, 370 times .08.
Somewhere like $30.
So it'd be like $30 a year.
So the next option would be $22.
Roughly, yes. That's the drop to 10.
Drop to 10 from 11, that would be
No.
keeping 11 all the time?
That would be just having our 11 that we have now and then dropping down to 10.
Okay. And that's a savings of 1 cent.
Yeah, correct. That is correct.
So that saves people $3.07 on average.
On average. $3.
Say that again, Jen. I want to understand your point.
I'm just looking at, if we're evaluating it based on what's the best scenario, what is the impact to the taxpayer, right? So if we're going up to 12 for the year to have one more firefighter on, it's $30 per household.
And that's for the 4 firefighters?
Yes.
Yeah. It's
Yes.
The page before.
And then if we did that and dropped to 10, it's $22 per household. So I'm just thinking, how much would I be willing to spend? It's every dollar, every cent counts in what we're doing. but,
And that's on top of the increase that we have now.
right,
So it's not just, it's just not
So-
$30. It's,
yeah,
if we're down to, say, 35 cents on the budget, if you agree with everything that I say and you say, yep, we're bringing that budget forward, 35, and then it'll be an extra 8 cents, so we'd be up to 43 cents. So overall tax rate, but just those firefighters, that's what it costs additionally. Just for
That's all.
those.
I just wanted to understand, thank you.
yeah. I'm just trying to think of what the
Impact.
overall impact is on top of what we've already got.
I'll just say if we don't do anything different, but we expect different results,
It ain't
don't
gonna
be
happen.
disappointed when it comes back and it's not different.
Well, I made my point at the beginning of the conversation, and that's where I still am at this moment in time. I think going to 12 is not going to do that much to save our overtime budget in the long run. I don't believe it will. I think it's the creativity that I spoke of earlier. Creative in my mind, maybe not so creative in other people, but there's got to be different ways that we attack this. And
Well, the town council, right now, the fire department's operating on 11, drop 11 as long as the overtime budget lasts. And what's happened in the past is if they had openings, they're allowed to use their salary dollars to offset their overtime overage. So that if you net out your salary dollars and your overtime lines as close to zero as possible without going over, being in the negative. That has been the past practice. If the council wants to change that past practice and say to the chief, 11 drop to 10, that would be a policy decision by the council. If the council wants to do 11 all the time, $50,000 I'll need to add to the budget,
To the overtime budget.
to the overtime budget.
So the difference of 11 full-time versus 11 dropped to 10 is about 104,000?
Yeah, if you add the two together, yeah.
Yeah.
Because you're saving 58 and then you're adding 47, yeah.
I don't know, what does everybody want to do?
Well, you don't have to make that decision exactly at this second. You guys can think about that a little bit longer if you want, and let me continue. If that's
Yeah,
okay.
that's a good idea.
I-
Let's-
Unless you guys want to make the
Putting it off.
decision, I'll back away and let
This
you make the
is- This
decision.
is important. There's a lot of facts of the ambulance fees and everything kind of thrown in here. Yeah, I'd like a little more time on that. I mean, this.
Well, we have to decide tonight.
Tonight, but let
Tonight.
me,
Okay.
Right.
yeah.
That's what I'm saying.
You
We
get
have
a
to-
little time to
All right, I
digest.
thought maybe I could get another night.
But you do get
Well,
another
maybe
bite
you
at the
can,
a-
but
you
we're
do
not
get-
gonna
You
be
do
here.
get another bite at the apple on the 13th.
Public hearing, but
The
that's
public
always an
hearing.
awkward time.
Yes.
It's better to have it,
Yeah, it's better to have it beforehand, because the last time that the council did major change at a public hearing, that was when you did when they did pay as you throw, and we all know how that turned
We won't
out.
go through that again.
So, but, you
So
know, you
let's-
do have another bite, so.
Let's talk about our options, though. I think let's minimize, Andy, what you're suggesting is, what?
What I'm suggesting is, I think we need to change the guidance that we gave. You know, if we don't change that guidance, we're gonna get back another year where we've got $1 million of overtime. And I don't think that's fair to the taxpayers to let that cost continue to grow. I'm open to suggestions on the guidance, you know, of these particular scenarios. I'm more in favor of, we're gonna staff to 11 and drop to 10. But if there's a scenario where, you know, during the day, we could bring in a per diem person to give, you know, the day shift a staff and then at night be at 10, I don't know if that's beneficial to the fire department or something, but I'm open to suggestions. But I'm not open to doing what we've continued to do.
Everyone's looking at me.
I thought you were ready to say something.
Well, I'm trying to figure out how to articulate it versus having a certain amount of money in overtime designated, and then, which is what it is now, and then once you hit that overtime, you will go to from 11 to 10. That's the way it is now,
That
right?
is the current way that we have it now.
Okay.
If we set right now, if we in the budget reduce the overtime budget by $56,836, we would be basically saying you have enough overtime to staff to 10. Now, obviously, the cost of overtime is going to be greater than that, depending on if you have somebody on short-term disability or something like that. You have some salary savings from open positions. We're going to have, no matter what, we're going to have higher cost on overtime than what we're currently budgeting, because we always move money from open positions into the overtime line. But if we reduce that by 56,000, we're basically telling the fire department, you are at 11, you need to drop to 10 if somebody's out. Just because somebody calls in sick doesn't give you the budget to call in somebody else on overtime. I think we're going to see additional benefits to that beyond the 56,000, but that's just me. I think we're going to see less sick time. I think I would be curious to see what that does to the overall cost.
So you're suggesting, to make sure I understand it, you're suggesting we decrease the overtime line by 56,000. However, that also with the stipulation of always going down to 10 if necessary, from 11 to 10. Is that correct?
Yeah, you don't call somebody in overtime unless you are, unless you're under 10.
So you're suggesting that would provide enough overtime in order to do that?
Well, based on the scenario Paul presented here, yes, because
Okay.
he's basically saying if we drop to 10, it's a $56,000 savings.
Okay,
And so if
gotcha.
we lowered the overtime budget by that 56,000, then we are financially telling chief he has to drop to 10. We might as well come out and say that guidance, because financially, that's the corner we're putting chief in.
Nancy?
So Andy, what you're saying, and the overtime would be if you went below 10?
Correct.
Yeah.
If you're under 10, if you got 9,
Right.
call somebody in for overtime, right? If you got a couple open positions, you're gonna have to pay some overtime. You got some salary savings there. It does become a challenge, but that's gonna be a challenge Paul's gonna have to manage, because if you got an open position that we budgeted straight time for that open
Yeah.
position, but chief's gonna be paying time and a half,
using
right?
it,
So
yeah.
that is going to create some challenge.
So did you want to make a motion or something?
Well, other options before we
yeah.
do?
But, I mean, we've talked about other changes to the budget. Do we want to wait and do all of those changes? How do we want?
I have some changes. I actually have to do some calculations because this is $56,000 of just there's benefits that go along, retirement, other things. So it's going to be more than $56,000. This is just the savings on overtime, straight overtime. What would it be?
If I could,
Yes.
thank you. I don't want anybody to be under the perception when Mr. Hunter assumes that if we drop overtime by 56,000, people aren't going to use their sick time. Our people use their sick time as they see need to use sick time. The town manager and I ran a lot of numbers, looked at a lot of data, and looked at a lot of information. Our organization does not abuse sick time. There is no evidence of that whatsoever. We unfortunately work in an environment where we pick up sick people. The chances of our people getting sick are higher than most. We've told our people, don't come to work if you don't feel well, because now you're going to affect the other 10 people on your group. So while one person's out sick for a 24-hour period, if they spread that to the others, we could have 3, 4, 5 days of people out sick, because now it's spreading amongst the group. So I don't want anybody to misunderstand that even if you drop overtime 56,000, which I'm not in favor of, sick time is going to be sick time, vacation time is going to be vacation time, personal time is going to be personal time. Those numbers are not going to change. And I would not be doing my job justice if I didn't at least, say dropping to 10 is not really the answer. But I understand the predicament you're in, but I felt it's my duty as the chief to, put my 2 cents forward. I'm really not in favor of dropping to 10. I think staffing at 11, looking at the budget and the overall impact to the average taxpayer, which, again, we also have to look at those taxpayers that are on a fixed income. Those are the ones that it hurts the most. And I understand a penny is a lot, but sometimes that's what the cost of it is, to have that safety net in place, that if you need a response, we're there to help you. So I just figured I'd add my 2 cents for that.
Thanks, Chief.
Chief, can you talk to, because you're currently staffing to 10, correct?
Yes, but if nobody's out on a paid time or sick time, then we're at 11.
And what are the impacts of going to 10 right now? Are you seeing any?
We are seeing shortages on apparatus being able to respond to an event. So if some of you look at social media, which is not the best place for information, the union's trying to do a good job at providing information to the public. However, they're using terminology which sometimes is in the wrong fashion. So when you see truck 1 out of service, well, it's not out of service for a breakdown. We don't have the staff because they're now on an ambulance call. And again, like I've described before, we staff 1 engine and 1 ambulance consistently. Everything else we do, we're cross-staffing people. We're making 3 people either do a fire truck or an ambulance. So if more ambulance calls come in, less fire trucks are available to respond. If we get a large fire event, we have less ambulances to respond because we can't cover it all. And I think I described that at our last meeting, that other communities do the same thing. So we're not doing anything different than any of the communities of our like size and organizational makeup. We're doing the same thing. Obviously, the more people we have, the more consistently we can staff all of the equipment that we think we want to have. But if we don't have the staff, we have to put trucks out of service, technically, that they're not available to go if needed on a call, that we don't have the people to put in them.
All right, if we're not ready to move on anything on this immediately, then we should continue on
We'll come
Paul's
back to it then.
recommendations, yeah. Thanks, Chief.
All right. So I do this every year for the council, or used to, and then finance has taken this over. Today, I talked to the police department, and they are willing to give up 1 vehicle at around $60,000. In our discussions, they have significant salary savings. They'd like to purchase that vehicle at end of year this year. And in talking to the chief, we're actually, our car 9, which is due to be replaced, we're going to look at replacing it with a hybrid kind of model. Nashua is using this hybrid model where they use electric and gas vehicle for patrol. It seems to be working out well for them. The idle time on the engines are down significantly because if you're not driving, the car is in electric mode, and then the batteries aren't being drained with all the apparatus, the laptops and things. So the police chief is looking at, talked to me and said I could save around $60,000 in next year's budget as long as I can be able to go ahead forward in this year's budget. I am okay. I looked at his budget and I feel comfortable saying that we can do that. Purchase the vehicle in this year's budget and save $60,000 next year. The next thing talked about was the building and grounds, the $55,000 for snow plowing. We also talked about Wasserman Park, the beach, getting that extension and potentially using fund balance in 26, 27 to do that project. Sorry about that. There's always one in the crowd. John O'Leary came in and they asked for additional $9,755 in their budget. MYA, I cut them $8,500 in talking to the MYA about signage. They believe the estimate could be around $5,000, so I'm adding $3,500 back into the budget for that. Another discussion that I believe the council talked about a little bit, I don't know how the council felt, is that pickup truck for Parks and Rec. That's that shared vehicle between Parks and Rec and Building and Grounds in the wintertime. In talking to DPW, that is a solution, that would be beneficial to both their departments. However, DPW asked that the vehicle be a four-wheel drive vehicle, so that it's, in the snow and stuff, it can be driven in the wintertime. With the two-wheel drive vehicle, there's a lot less traction, and so they don't feel comfortable driving the two-wheel drive vehicle in the winter, so that would be a four-wheel drive vehicle. Looking through my budget, I know Matt had it in his budget in Parks and Rec for about $45,000. Looking through my budget, I do have some savings potentially to buy it this year, at the end of this year. A 150 or a 250, just using Ford because that's what we normally buy out of this year's money, and we could potentially save that money, about $45,000 in the budget, but I don't know how the council felt. I know there was some discussion on that. So that's a decision that I'm leaving, hate to say this, up to the council to see how you feel about that pickup truck. And like I said, potentially I could buy it at the end of this fiscal year. If everything if the stars align, everything falls into place, I should have some savings.
If we did not purchase it from excess or savings this year, that just goes to fund balance, it becomes a wash at the end, right?
Correct. It would just drop in a fund balance, yes. So, I didn't put a recommendation in there, but just want to get the council's feel. But like I said, it's $45,000, and I believe I can purchase it throughout the budget. There's savings throughout the budget.
Peter?
I'm in favor of that.
Okay, so we'll make that
Yep.
change on the spreadsheet.
Yep.
That will change the overall, whoops, geez, I'm sorry. I'm thinking I'm with my computer here. That will change the overall savings of $246,522. That will drop the revised general fund appropriation down to $34,960,256. Wastewater comes in at $6.7 million. I don't have any changes for that. Media fund, we talked about it. The workers' comp was over by about there was an extra number fat fingered in there. So there's a $4,637 decrease. However, the equipment line, we got our quote in, remember when we talked about that a long time ago at the beginning of the month? I know it seems like forever ago. But there's $60,000 add there. So a net of $55,000, $363 added to the budget but that also comes out of revenue, so that's tax neutral. Fire protection stays the same. Police outside detail, fire detail, and library. The extra money from the library, the $17,000, stays the same. Grand total of to move to the public hearing prior to any other discussions would be $42,909,979. I know that the sheet says different, but I took out the $45,000. And then capital reserve funds, the capital reserve fund deposit would be down, although it's on the wrong line. It'd be $2,410,000 for general fund capital reserve, $600,000 for wastewater capital reserve. Total appropriations for all funds would be $45,919,979. Tax rate would be roughly 6 cents difference.
Could you give me that total again, Paul?
45, I can run all the numbers, but 45,919,979. But feel better if you're in agreement and make a motion to move all this. I can do it in my spreadsheet and get you the real number before any other adjustments.
Does that work? So you want a motion for this number
Though I need a motion for all the adjustments that I laid out.
right here?
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Nancy Harrigan, second by Jennifer. Any further discussion on these adjustments? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 700.
And
Thanks.
that's all that I have as a presented, PowerPoint presentation for the council. If I'll go back to my location and put these other numbers in and whatever discussion else that the council has for discussion. In years past, you went department by department by department to see if there was any additional adjustments that the council would like to see.
From Pete.
Yeah, Paul, we'd like a 5-minute recess if you don't mind. All right. So we'll be back in about 5.
5-minute recess.
All right, we're going to come back from recess at 8:29.
All right. I have, excuse me,
Yes,
may I?
raise your hand.
I have some additional clarification for a question that was asked from Town Chairman Rothaus about billing. I'm just going to bring Pat up because Pat deals with it in the welfare realm with it. So Pat, if you want to explain what you explained to me real quick.
Hi, Pat.
This is for the ambulance charges. So you had mentioned that sometimes people get charged, like the insurance companies will charge and only pay a customary rate. Even though there's no contract with us, they still say to the customer, all right, this is a customary rate that we do for ambulances, we're only going to pay this amount. And so what happens, and this is, I understand what you're saying because this does happen, then the client or the patient then gets charged from us the difference of what the insurance company didn't pay. What people don't realize is that they need to appeal that decision with their insurance company because it is not an accurate assessment from the insurance company, but insurance companies will do that. So I understand that situation that does happen, and that's what we tell people that they need to do. They have to appeal it with their insurance company in order for them to pay the full rate, because they will try to do that.
And does it happen often? Do they often change?
Yes, it does. It does. Insurance companies do try to get away with that a lot. So you'll see, they'll say this was a customary rate. So they'll, instead of paying the full bill, and the deductible goes to the client or whatever they have, they'll say, well, we're only going to pay a customary rate of this amount, and therefore it doesn't pay the full bill. And even though they say the customer, let's say, still owes a deductible of, like, let's say $800, and therefore that's the customary bill, and then there's still another $400 left open, the customer's then going to get charged for the full $1,200. So they have to go back, like I said, and appeal that decision with their insurance company, because insurance companies do try to do that.
All right, and since you're here about the ambulance fees, when it comes to a Medicare patient, the Medicare amount was $400 and some for the basic thing. And then do they have to then pay if they don't have that extra insurance for the 20%? They pay 20% more?
Well, I think we did get an answer from that from, I think, it's.
Yeah, it's the Medigap portion of it.
Yeah,
And so they would have to pay that. So basically though, but once they get to that, that's all. So even if the bill's another, $400 above that, they don't have to
Yeah,
pay that
it's
difference.
40%. They pay the Medicare rate, we write off 40%, and that's the 20% you gotta get,
Okay,
right?
yep.
But if it's Medicaid, then we
We
will
write
it
off.
off.
Yes.
We write off the
Right.
difference of what Medicaid doesn't pay.
Right.
That one we do.
Okay.
But I do get a lot of ambulance abatements requests for the Medicare that the client feels that they can't pay. So that's usually what most of our hardship abatements requests for ambulance abatements are.
Okay, thank you, Pat.
You're
I
welcome.
appreciate it.
Wait,
Nate,
Pat.
hold on.
Pat, can you tell me what's the basis on the appeal, just so that people know that? I mean, if people have to take it a step further and make that appeal,
Yeah, they're not paying the full charge, basically. So I know I have actually referred people to the federal insurance department because that is where insurance companies, if the insurance company continues to deny them, then they can go and make an appeal through them, and the federal office will, because if they're not paying the full rate and they don't have an agreement with us to pay a customary rate, then they need to pay the full amount.
So it's based upon the fact that they don't have a customary agreement.
Right.
Okay, all right. I just needed to know what people should be saying. I understand there's no customary
Yeah.
agreement between,
They're really hoping that people won't appeal.
well, yeah, how would people know? I mean, if they get a bill, they,
Exactly.
And that's
It's
true with
right.
everything. That's not just the
Exactly,
ambulance.
exactly, and that's one of the problems, is that people don't understand that, insurance companies will do this, and that they need to ask for, they could ask for what was called a reconsideration of the full cost. So that's what, but they should ask for an appeal, because that's on the back of all their insurance paperwork, to always be able to do that.
Thank you.
Thanks, Pat.
One more, if I may.
Yes, Paul?
I'd like to bring the fire chief back up.
Sure.
Because I know this is a burning question in everybody's mind. So, Chief,
Yes, sir.
we're running 10. The 2 ambulances are out. That means we have 3 gentlemen left at Station 1.
The individuals.
3 individuals, sorry. 3
No, that's okay.
firefighters. The call comes in for chimney fire. Can somebody take the ladder truck and drive it to the scene while the 2 others are in the engine?
No, usually what happens is when that first truck arrives, there's a lot of things to do within the first minute or so when you arrive. So obviously the driver drives the truck and needs to get that in operation when it arrives. The officer in the seat makes an assessment of what needs to happen going forward and if any other resources needed. And then the third person starts pulling off equipment, getting it ready to take care of the problem, whatever it may be. So if I remove one of those people off of the fire truck, then I don't have enough people to at least, and even 3 isn't really the right number on an engine, but 3 works. That's what most communities do. But anything less than 3, you don't have a really true operational piece of equipment at an event.
So even with 2, you couldn't take the ladder truck to the scene?
No, it wouldn't be prudent to take the truck with 1 person on it. That doesn't serve any purpose.
What about a pumper? Is that what you call it, a pumper truck? Holds
The engine.
Yeah, so an engine would be the same function. You still need a complement of firefighters to operate the piece and put the firefighters on the fire ground to operate.
Right,
at the incident.
because the reason, this is something that I've contemplated, wondered, asked about actually
Sure.
in the past. When we go to an accident, intersection of Wire and Bedford Road,
Sure.
do we have to, we run a truck out there, not because, it's gonna be cleaning up gas or something, I suppose, but it's really to have an extra guy in case the ambulance complement can't do the job.
There are occasions, again, yeah, so there are those EMS events. We'll just keep it generic, right? Because there are some high-level acuity calls when we go to people's homes that require additional staff on the
Oh,
ambulance.
nope, that's
But
good, because
but a
then,
car accident, and I'll go back to that one, we send a complement of people to mitigate whatever the crash has for fluids or whatever else, if the patient is of such a high acuity level that we need additional people
okay,
in
no,
the back of
then
the
let's go
ambulance.
back to the house, if you don't
Sure.
mind. At the house, there's no cars involved.
Nope.
The injury is an illness or an ailment or, fall off a ladder, whatever it might be. So you really need manpower maybe just to move this person. So to bring the pumper or the engine or whatever we're gonna call it, to have it at the scene, it's really not necessary. The reason you do it, I'm imagining, is so if there is a call, they can leave right there and go. Why wouldn't we have that extra person to assist the ambulance crew in a vehicle, an SUV or a sedan? Because these trucks take a beating, and we know what the costs are today, and if we can lengthen the life by not running them for calls where they're really not necessary.
Well, that's, again, it is necessary. Again, we just talked about, I can't effectively run a fire truck with 2 people.
No, but that
So if
person will
I
drive it to the
remove-
scene.
So if I remove 1 person from the fire truck to put him in a pickup truck to follow the ambulance, I now only have 2 people in the fire truck.
No, right, but then that truck then leaves the station, goes to the next scene, and the guy with the pickup truck or sedan peels
Meets
off and
them
meets
there.
them there.
Okay, we could look at that option. It's not really the best way to, use equipment, but we can still, look, at all options are on the table. I don't agree with that option to do, but, I certainly can take it into consideration. Certainly
You're
understand.
right, I'm a layman, but it just makes good sense to me. That's, Peter.
Chief, so 2 firefighters can't operate an engine, is what you're saying? I'm trying to get that straight.
I didn't say they couldn't operate it. It's
Yeah.
not, if you don't have an effective team to manage an incident with only 2 people.
Okay.
That's not an appropriate staffing model. The standard that we could be held to is the NFPA standard, and they say we should have 4.
Okay.
Most communities don't have 4.
Okay.
So most of us are operating with 3,
Okay.
which is still not where we should be, but that's a number that we can make work. Anything less than 3, you don't have an effective team of people to really function and do anything.
All right.
Again, we always plan for the worst-case scenario, because we have to.
Yep.
You can't just say, well, I think it's just, somebody's oil furnace backfired.
No,
It might
but
be
you would
something
have the
else.
3 personnel to operate that vehicle when it got to the secondary scene, not the injury at the home, but when it got to the scene of a fire or whatever,
There's still
you'd have
a
that
di-
full
There
complement.
would still be a delay in that third person coming in with whatever vehicle you want to put them in.
Paul has mentioned on a number of occasions that the cost of that ladder went from 1.6 million to 2.2 million over the course of 2 years. The engines are getting astronomical, and we got the 2, and so it's, for me, to lengthen those lives somehow.
Sure.
It's important, and that's why I was just wondering
No,
on
I
that.
understand.
So, no, thanks, chief.
Anything else you need?
All right.
No,
Well, I mean, what did we do all those years when we ran 10 firefighters?
We had,
We had
give the devil
9.
to do, we had fewer pieces of equipment, maybe, I'm guessing, I don't know.
We're only running probably, we know we were running an engine, we know we were running an ambulance, we know we were running Station 2. So you had 3 guys down at Station 2. You had 2 guys on an ambulance. 3 is 5, so there's 8. So the other 2 were on either the ambulance, or one of the guys peeled off the ambulance and went with the ladder truck, I think. Well, how do you run 10 now, chief? Maybe it's the same scenario. How do you run 10 now?
So 10 now, like the town manager said, we have 3 at Station 2, and they run either Engine 2 or Ambulance 2. They can't run both. They only run one or the other. At Station 1, we have 3 guys on Engine 1, 2 guys on Ambulance 1, so that's 5. 5 plus 3 is 8. The 2 remaining will staff the ladder truck. Now, again, it's not what we want, but it's what we have. So we will move the ladder truck and get it to the incident, and if we need it, we have it. Just to send one person to drive it, that's just not the right way to do business either. That's a very technical piece of equipment, and to have anything less, look, I don't like staffing it with 2, but that's what we've been told we have for numbers. So that's what we work with. But if any situation comes in requiring us to move more ambulances, that just really decreases the amount of fire trucks we have available to go to anywhere. And like we spoke before, if we were to have that single-family home residential fire, we need 12 people to really do the right job and make sure everybody's operating safely. Anything less than that is, the potential for a problem. We've been very lucky with every incident that we've had, but, that's not going to happen all the time. There will be a time where we're going to have a problem, and we're not going to be prepared for it. So I'd rather, have as many times as 12 people as we can, but money's money, and I understand. I don't want anybody to think that I don't understand the tax rate and the position that you're in. But to go off Councilor Jobin's thought process of, 12 people is an extra 8 cents per 1,000, and the quick calculation that seems to be an average number I'm hearing is about $30 a year. I don't know. I pay taxes in town. I live in town. The last town I lived in, I understand that in order to have a safe community, and if I need those people to come help me, I don't know, $30 a year extra, it's not even 10 cents a day at the end of the year. So I think I can find 10 cents a day, but that's just me. There is no easy answer to this equation, but whatever the direction the council goes in, I will do my best to provide the community the services it deserves and needs. So I don't know how else to answer.
Thanks, chief. All right, we'll start with general government then? Okay, we'll go through each department. If you have anything you want to say, any adjustments to be made,
Speak now or forever hold your
Or
peace.
forever hold your peace till the public hearing anyhow. All right, on general government, 01. All good? Okay, we'll, want to move to 02. Assessing. Uh, Next, 03.
I would skip fire because I
Yeah,
think
we'll
that's
go
going to
back
be
to it.
long and go back
Yeah.
to that at the end.
All right, lives up, police.
04 is police.
Yeah. 05, communication. Oh, Jennifer?
My only thing on
Police.
police was the 2 new vehicles, but you're saying it's down to 1 and it's going to be a hybrid, is that correct?
Instead of 3 new vehicles, we're going to 2 new vehicles in this budget, and we're going to buy a hybrid out of
This year?
24-25's budget. Yes, and it's going to be a hybrid.
Okay.
Do we need to make that adjustment now, or is that already
That-
assumed?
That was.
That was already made in the
The change was
change
okay.
orders that we did.
So, all set, Jim?
Yep.
Communications, 05. And Paul, you're still, 03, that's why, I'm just going by tab, so, sorry about that. So you want to wait on that one?
We're waiting on
03. 06, code enforcement. 7, public works. Anything on highway, 08. 09 is solid waste. 13, public, Parks and Rec.
I had the beach, but Paul already covered that.
Right.
Paul's one step ahead of us.
I listened.
He got the hint.
15, library. Equipment maintenance,
Equipment maintenance, we're removing the 52K for snow removal.
55, was it?
That's 17, building and
Yeah,
grounds.
Oh, I must have typed it on the wrong line. Thanks.
Well, which is 17 buildings, grounds, and that
Yeah.
was done. 21, community development. 24, tax collector. 25, welfare. And we got number 10, wastewater. 32, media. And is there any other?
27, you do not, really, that's debt.
Yeah.
Debt is debt. It's what we have to pay. 33 is fire protection. That's basically Pennachuck Waterworks in the southeastern part of town, I guess you could call that. Out that way, off of Manchester Street. Then you got your outside details for both police and fire. And then you got you already went through your library, which had the extra $17,000, which is 38. So you can go back to 03, fire. Seems like there has been no other adjustments than what was already voted on and approved in those departments.
Correct.
I know it's getting late, and I do have my department heads out there, and I appreciate them coming to be able to answer questions. So I hate to do this to my fire chief and my assistant fire chief, but if I can let all my other departments go home tonight and get some sleep, so we can do it all again tomorrow.
We appreciate everybody being here this evening. Sorry you have to be here, because I know it's tedious sitting there, but we do appreciate everything you have for us and all you do.
They were counting how many times Nick got the back of my head. That was the over-under today.
All right, thank you very
Thank
much.
you.
Good night.
All right. That's it. On this, I guess, I don't know if anybody has path forward that they're interested in.
As we all look at each other. You in? Yeah. Well, I think we're into a compromising position here. I think there's the position that Andy has made related to, if I understand correctly, I'll try to summarize it, is having, and what was the amount, though? I don't know what it was.
$56,836 would be the reduction in the overtime budget to give direction to staff to 11 and drop to 10.
And what would that leave for overtime?
What's the total overtime?
If you,
It's 562 and 380.
$535,230.
That's with the reduction.
That's with the reduction, yes.
And that doesn't assume any change to the supervisory overtime. That is just looking at the firefighter overtime.
Correct. The supervisory overtime is contract related. And there will be additional, there will be an additional amount because of, and I'll get that number, the final number if
What do
it
you mean
goes
it's
through.
contract related and why would the fire?
Because the supervisory is basically a supervisor for supervisor. So there has to have two supervisors on staff at all
Okay.
times.
All right.
And that's contract related. It's in their contract, that's spelled out that way.
so you're saying $535,230
$230. Oh.
overtime
Yep,
to budget for the year and to, from day one, go from 11 to 10.
That is what that recommendation would be saying,
Okay.
yeah. It would be putting chief in that position. He'd have to go to 10 from day one. It's the only way he could track his budget.
Now, 535,000, that brings it down to 2018-19. I'm looking at what's been, because this past year, we spent
You-
1 million.
Yeah, you have to add the supervisory. There's another 200 and
Okay, I
some odd
got you.
thousand
Okay, I got you.
supervisory overtime in that.
262,000.
Okay, I got you. So the actual total,
Yeah, the total overtime is 854 before the reduction, I
so
believe.
787
Yeah,
basically.
87 or 97.
Would it be 90? 3, 6, 7, 8, 9,
The
you're
total
right.
supervisory
It would
as
be
well as firefighter
790.
overtime, the total overtime.
yeah, that would be, I don't have it in front of me.
That sounds
see your
right,
booklet.
797,000?
That's 262, so let's say 270 and 530, so 2 would be 7, about 800,000 total,
You're right, just shy of,
just shy of 800,000.
I think your number was just 10,000 off.
Yeah.
Just shy of $800,000.
So
Quick
we're
math.
talking this option right here, or is that something different?
We're talking
Yes.
about what Andy just said.
Yes, no, that
That's
option,
this
the
right
bottom option on Paul's sheet.
Oh, okay. So that's one option. Anybody else have an option? Jen, do you have?
I don't know, I have a hard, it's,
I have an
when I
option.
look
let
at,
me-
when I look, it's only $22 a year. For me, I can afford $22 a year. But when we add on that there are gonna be increases on the school side, it, you know, $22 for somebody else might be, that might push them over what they can afford. So,
I mean,
It's
you're
hard.
exactly right. $22 is not gonna make a difference in my lifestyle, right? Like, I'm not even worried about it. And quite honestly, if Chief came up and said I needed, this $56,000 for training, I'm a retired Army guy. I'd eat that in a minute. Yes, absolutely, you could have it. But again, I go back to overtime is growing at an unsustainable rate, and how do we shift that pattern? That's the only thing I'm trying to do is shift the overtime pattern. It isn't the $22 this year, it's the $22 this year and whatever next year and the year after. And there's people, again, you and I probably doesn't make a difference, but there's people out there that does make a difference. If you watch the school budget committee, I couldn't believe it. The lady got up there and she went through her tax bill, the increase since she's lived in Merrimack, she can't afford a house payment anymore. And it isn't because her lifestyle's changed, it's because her tax bill has changed. What do you do about that? She's got the same income, same lifestyle, she doesn't have the same house payment.
And the other thing I come back to is that the calls haven't increased over the couple of years. So if they've stayed the same level of calls, I don't know that I can justify adding more people if we're not having more calls.
I think the exercise for the 12 was to see if, in fact, we could have any overtime savings, and it
Right.
doesn't equate to that, using the calculations based on
I
what we
think we were
know.
hoping.
Right.
Well, I'm not sure, I guess I'm looking at somewhere between the two. I think we need to designate a certain amount of overtime, and we can talk about whatever that is. It needs to be a little bit more than it was before, because that's just the cost. But I do believe there has to be a limitation, a boundary of the overtime. So what I would like to suggest is maybe a compromise, is set up a generous, reasonable overtime budget. But at a certain point, say from this point on, you will drop from 11 to 10. And I'm just throwing a number out, I'm not finalizing it. Let's say we put it at $850,000. Total. And let's say it's 700,000, you will be required to drop from 11 to 10. Now, that leaves an option to be creative on how can you extend that overtime longer. Whether that mean at night, you don't do it, you drop to 10, but not during the day. You use per diem in a certain creative way, or come up with a total reconfiguration we can't think of. But that allows you a certain amount of money to still have overtime. We can't say you have $850,000 and then it stops. You can't do that. That's unreasonable. But if we say at this point, you're required to drop down, but if you can think of some way to extend that time so that you don't cut down till the very end of the year, or maybe not at all, that's a choice that you can have, how creative you want to be. I'm just trying to think if that's a compromise between the two extremes.
So Nancy, so you're saying it's fill 11 for 11 to the extent of a certain number, and then after that, it goes fill 10 of 11.
You can. They could drop to 10 even before the 700,000, and whatever creative they want to do it, to be able to extend that, so maybe they don't have to drop down to 10 until May, versus leaving it as is, and they're going to have to use it. They'll use up, it would hope. I mean, what are we going to say, 850, and then no more? That's impossible.
So I hear what you're saying, but it's almost like you're saying, but it's unenforceable too.
It's enforceable in the sense that you will drop down to 10 at a certain point.
Well, and that's basically what we've done this past budget. But
You're right.
what I think, it has to be the goal of being creative right out of the gate, and I'm still stuck on the overnight.
And that's what
Because
I'm
during the
trying-
day, I know that there's a lot of things happening, you know the equipment goes out, and I recognize that, but so they can't just, when all of a sudden we get to the 700 stop, it's really gotta be in the plan right out of the gate, as soon as that
Well,
budget.
to me, it would motivate them to do it earlier on their own, because it would extend their money longer.
So,
But I may be wrong. But I'm just trying to think of a compromise here.
so I'm not confused. with this, and I'm sure, so the chief's not confused, because if I'm confused, he might be confused. Let's break out the two separates. You're saying 850 total. We got to break them out,
Okay,
because the supervisors are supervisors.
Okay.
Right now in the budget, there's $854,000
Right.
between the two lines. So what you're saying, Nancy, is there's your overtime budget. For firefighters, it's 592,000, roughly $592,000. That's what you get for overtime. Does that include staffing shortages, meaning vacancies?
well, does it now?
They use their savings from their service salary above.
So why would that be any different?
I'm just asking the
Why would
questions.
that be any different?
Well, that's because that's how we got to our 1 million.
That's how you get to 1 million. He had $300,000 worth
$50,000.
of savings in, he had 300,000 savings in personal service costs, and they used it in overtime.
Ah,
So see what I'm saying? So in their eyes, give me my budget. My personal service budget is $4 million. I'm just throwing out a number. $3.3 million of that is for salaries and benefits. I have $1 million left for overtime because I have 3 vacancies. They can run that as overtime. That's where we're getting into a little bit of this. They use 54% of their budget, or they use 70% of their budget, but they had a vacancy for, out of those 6 months, they might have had a vacancy for 4 of those 6 months. So I think that's also part of this situation that we got to look at. Yeah, we spent $1 million, and I'm not comfortable spending $1 million on overtime. However, if you're allowing the fire department, and this has never been said, and this is another thing, are you going to allow the fire department their staffing savings above that they don't really control the budget? Finance controls that budget, putting it together. So they're not inflating it, the salary dollars. If they have vacancies, can they use those vacancies to help offset some of the overtime? That needs to be discussed as well. And I think that's part of the problem as well, is that they do have some of these savings. Right now, though, looking at their projection of what they were running and what they had for salary savings and what they had left in their overtime budget, it was not going to make it to the end of the year. So the chief put in play, dropped to 10 right now. Who knows? In March, when things get back to normal, he might say, all right, guys, we can run for a little bit longer at 11, but don't go hog wild. And then, or May, he could say, we're back up to full staff at 11 because I have $100,000 and there's 10 weeks left, and that whatever X amount of money, we can run at full staff.
And that's-
So those are situations that, for clarity in the fire chief's mind, what makes up the 800 or the $592,000? Is that just for vacation, personal time, sick leave, training, callback, projects, and EMS training? Is that all that overtime's for? And then what about the vacancies? That is the direction that I think he needs, and I think that's the direction, correct me if I'm wrong, chief, but I think that's the direction that your fire department, your firefighters would like as well. Is what direction do they go in with the vacancies?
What was the break point this past, or have we hit that point, you said?
What are we at, Paul?
December ones that just came in.
Well, he's looking at, Jennifer, did you, well, Paul's looking that up, if you had,
I mean, if they're not spending that money because they don't have somebody to fill that position, why could they not use that money?
yeah, I agree with that, Jay.
I'm just saying, though, that's gonna show them overspending their overtime.
But
Oh, I
it's,
see, you're putting that kind of to the tally of.
The
what
overtime.
overtime
It doesn't
spent.
go up to salary dollars, it stays.
right, it's, and that's why it's, right.
But I'm losing 50 cents on the dollar, too. I'm losing 50 cents on every dollar because overtime's at 1.5%.
Okay,
So I'm losing 50 cents. So they might have 3 vacancies, say at $200,000. Let's use even numbers. They might have vacancies totaling $100,000. They got to bring that back. They don't have they have $100,000 to spend, but that doesn't equate hour for hour.
Right, because
Unless I'm losing
overtime is
50
time and a
cents, time and a half.
Right.
So it might be really based on $75,000 worth of savings of personal service.
Right.
Hours savings. It's confusing, but,
Yeah,
But
no,
that's
I get your
okay.
point.
I mean, it's still, the
but
theory
it's
behind it's still
management on
true.
his end
Right.
with that.
Right, because you can't spend it, you know, you're assuming you're gonna fill that position at some point. And
Correct.
you're gonna need money in that line.
Correct.
So you have to,
Spend it wisely.
yeah, figure out the percentage that,
Yeah.
the year and stuff.
Paul,
Yeah, they're at, fire's at 74% for firefighter for the year of their overtime, and the person, the supervisory and professional is at 54%
So,
through December 31st.
so supervisory, like I said, they're on. 54% versus 50. I'm almost there. When we talk about number. 74%. Now granted, they're filling 1.6 shifts. So they're really filling almost 2 people
Per shift. No, per day.
4 out of 7 days, or 5 out of 7 days.
What makes up that 1.6 again?
Vacation, sick, personal, vacancies.
No,
Workers'
but
comp.
right now, their run rate, you're saying, is 1.6.
Mhm.
How many people do we have out of workers' comp?
We
right
have
now?
1, so that's 2 shifts a week. I have a vacancy, there's 2 shifts a week. There's 4 shifts right there. 4 out of my 7 days I'm filling with overtime. Automatically.
So, Paul, so what you're saying is,
60% of my time there. The other day is somebody using time. And there's some other things.
And that's 1.6 with us dropping down to 10, we're filling 1.6?
No, that was run rate that we've, on
Prior to
average, for the last
implementing
3 years.
the
I
drop
haven't,
down to 10.
yeah,
Sorry, Pete.
no, it's okay.
we're
so
filling
Paul-
the .6.
Paul, so what I'm hearing you saying is, basically, the unfilled positions, there's 2, did I see Paul say, or 1?
There's 1.
Okay, so what you're referring to is unexpended fund balance, correct?
No, I'm unexpended personal service dollars,
Right.
Okay.
not fund balance.
Right. And
Which, do we typically do that in other cases for other departments?
Police, we all have allowed it because they're running at 4 or 5 guys down. So to keep the streets safe, we're running overtime for them. So yeah, we've done that. We've done that in communications.
Okay,
But years past, we used to use those salary savings to do at year-end projects, such as maybe the beach or other things. Paving roads, additional paving. We used to throw money into those kind of deals. But times have changed, and I get it. Right now, the atmosphere and the fire, and it's not Merrimack, but the atmosphere and fire is that a lot of our surrounding communities are short people. Manchester just got a SAFER grant this year, starting, I believe, March. 12 guys have to be on by March 1st. They got the same SAFER week grant we got, but they got 12. We got 8. So they had to hire 12 people to begin March 1st. They didn't get newbies. They went to departments, put it out there, and people went up to Manchester. Nashua, short, they did their call. Goffstown got a SAFER grant for 4. They have to hire. Londonderry short, they have to hire. It's the same scenario. We're not alone with being short individuals and short firefighters. The difference is that at the time we got the SAFER grant, it was staff to 11 as long as the overtime money lasts. And what we get into, is we get into these Facebook fights with, we're not able to, we have to staff to 10 now. Because the overtime money ran out. And I think what the council's trying to avoid is that issue going forward.
Well,
That-
I mean, for me, I could care less about Facebook.
I
really could.
understand.
What, and my intent is not to cut the fire's budget. I'm hoping we can figure out a solution that doesn't cut the fire's budget. My intent is to try to shift the pattern of overtime growth. We've got to somehow shift that curve, because right now it's pretty steep.
Yeah, and it's
And
climbing.
that's all I'm trying to figure out. If we can figure out a solution that doesn't impact this budget, but we are confident that somehow going forward, we are not gonna see the overtime growth we've seen in the last couple years, I'm content, right? But we've got to somehow shift that upward curve that we're currently
Right.
seeing.
And how do we do that is the issue.
Exactly.
And correct, not arguing that. When we brought these individuals on 3 years ago, their leave balances were 0. A lot of them were probationary employees, a lot of them went a whole year without having any leave, except sick time and personal time. They're 3 years in now. They have vacation time accrued. They have sick time that they have accrued. Personal time resets every year. They're starting to having more leave to be able to use. Granted, we've had enough turnover in our department. I believe there's 5 people right now. How many probations do we have? Around 5 probationary employees, which don't have vacation time, but they have personal time and sick time. So we've had enough turnover where we've tried to keep that low. Do I think the 592 is a good number? I think the 592 should get us 3/4 of the way there, depending if I'm fully staffed or not. And like I've always said, if we have a guy on a workers' comp, I think this year it's about $65,000 that I paid in overtime to cover workers' comp. That comes from other areas and other savings in the budget to cover that.
Do we get paid for workers' comp?
We do, however, with the fire department, it's a little trickier. Because of the way it's written in a contractual issue.
Okay, so and obviously it wouldn't cover overtime, but it would cover some of the salary of that person who's in,
Correct.
who
Covers
is the
his.
workers' comp person.
It covers his salary, for the most
Okay.
part.
So
70%?
that saves,
60%.
so it saves 60% of that person's salary,
Yeah,
which helps with, okay.
but we're not paying his 30% for his retirement.
Right, I
We're
understand.
not paying Medicare of 145, so we're not paying like 32% of that money into the benefits. So we're saving money there too. But yeah, no, his salary is covered. It's the overtime that I,
Overtime. But you have to be able to give some credit of that to
Correct.
the overtime.
yeah, right. But he's getting paid while he's out, even though we're
Right.
getting reimbursed.
Yeah, but it's workers' comp.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it's not dollar for dollar. It's not costing me only 50 cents on a dollar. It's costing me a lot more, and I haven't done the calculations, than 50 cents on the dollar. So, I guess the direction is either we feel that $592,000 is significant. It's a almost $30,000 increase from the prior year to cover the additional leaves. And, we can look at, because if I look at this right now, we spent $842,000 last year, 23-24 in overtime for the firefighters. For lack of a better term, I'll just call them the line. The guys on the line, not the supervisors, the line. And we spent $1.7 million of salary dollars. And in the budget, with raises now, it's 2.5, so it's about $800,000. So we did save some money comparison. Without looking at it, it covered the overtime. without having the book in front of me from 23, 24.
The empty positions
The
and
empty
so on
position covered. He didn't overspend his overtime when you added in the empty positions. We made sure of that. But they had to drop to 10.
That's coming up to, this year, it's on track.
This year,
to
it's
be
on
that.
track to go over, and the chief didn't want to wait till
Appreciate that.
March, April
Yeah.
to say, we're done. He started to peel back in November, December.
Do you know about when, at the trend we're going right now, do you know when it would have come to a conclusion?
Yeah, the trend, what'd you do it, November 1st? December 9th, all right. So we've had, say, 8 pay periods since then. It would have been over by now. Would have been February
It would have
1st,
run
we would
out
have
of-
run out at that pace.
The overtime budget and the.
No,
empty-
just the overtime budget would have been out by
Okay, but with the personnel, empty personnel, how does,
probably, you had
because if
another,
we're using that money,
you probably had another 5 weeks of run out.
oh, really?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe
So
we
maybe-
could look, go ahead.
I was just gonna say, if we can't come to a consensus tonight, you know, one of the path forward that we could do is approve the budget as is, and on the quarterly reviews, not only look at the overtime, but look at the overtime plus the salary savings. And if we look like we're overrunning Q1, Q2 review, we could give direction at that time and say, it's time to start dropping to 10. It's only Q1, supposed to be 25% spent, 45% spent, or whatever. You could give direction at that time.
We could,
I like
we,
that.
we can implement a purchase power report. It's what I used to use when I was in private sector. Is that, one thing we do have here in the government is we have years of data. And we can see what our first quarter versus our total was spent. And a purchase power report that I used to do is, I used to take into account, and I did this for revenues for a lot when we talk about motor vehicles, is that for the first quarter, normally we spend 32% of the budget in overtime. Are we on track for that 32%? And I think that's what you're saying. Are we on track? Not that it's only 25, be great if it's 25, 20, but it's never that way. It could be 32, it could be 17, it could be whatever.
You may have some empty positions, and with salary savings, you're not even close to 25%.
Correct.
It's funny, I was thinking I had percentages down. Should we be talking about percentages rather than specific numbers? And what you're suggesting actually does that on a pivotal time schedule, which is, I like that idea.
Yeah, I can dust off my accounting books and talk to Paul about doing purchasing power reports.
And that would make it clear the expectations too, because on a quarterly basis, it'll be known that we're looking at it, and that really lets the fire department know and track it themselves. So I like that personally. I don't know about anybody else.
And we can share, we share information, we can share that information with the chief. We can actually do it, purchasing power reports monthly to the chief. And it's just, once you get one set up, it's the establishment for the 12 months. Once you get them set up for the 12 months, you know what it's
So you
supposed to
can
be.
gauge it.
You
on a
can gauge
monthly
it going
basis.
forward
I like that.
and know, because July is a tough month. It's our first month of the fiscal year, and, vacation month.
Yeah.
August is vacation month. October, November is hunting months. So that there are different things in the first part of the year compared to, it's snowing in December, it's January. Christmas is another time when people take off, Thanksgiving. It's February vacation week with gentlemen and ladies, who have kids. So, I think that's a good compromise, that we can
I
start
think that-
running that purchasing power report.
So Paul, this all sounds real good, and I'm liking what I'm hearing, but push comes to shove. Is there a control when we reach these milestones and red flags go up? Do we have control over that?
Yes, you
Yeah.
do. You got
We
the
can say
e-brake.
from this point on, you'll go down to 10.
He has the e-brake,
Right.
because he'll see it, and he'll know. if his purchasing power report for the first quarter should be at 32% and he's at 43, he knows he's got to start pulling the e-brake and slow it down. And then he sees what he's at, because if he's doing it monthly, he should know monthly where he's at. And in December, at the end of December, he can see where he's at, and maybe it's supposed to be at 59% and he's at 62. So he's like, okay, the e-brake's working a little bit here. So we get back in line. It'll give him tools in the toolbox, meaning the fire chief. It'll give the fire chief and his assistants tools in the toolbox to be able to manage the overtime. And if we're gonna try to staff to 11, and if overtime gets out of whack, doing the additional money for salaries, and we don't move money, we can start moving the money around, but we never do that. We just leave it in salary dollars in the budget, so that it shows year after year what the budgets are. It does give him an extra tool in his toolbox to be able to better manage. And, you know, he runs the reports and we talk every other week, so we'll know where we're at. And, you know, we knew at the middle of November that we would have to do something different. And, you know, we knew that stuff was coming. Right. Yeah, right. So,
Okay. Works.
I like that idea. I don't know about anybody else.
Yep.
and we can always look at the revenue on the other side too. The ambulance stuff, we can bring that forward as well. And it doesn't have to be tied to the budget, but if you want it by the 13th, before you make your final determinations, we'll try our best to get you that ambulance data so we can have a discussion.
All right. So we're good?
Try.
What, I'm not hearing from anybody else.
So that
I'm
means
with you.
keeping the fire budget as it is right now,
Yes.
right, with no changes.
And with the understanding that they are utilizing, as Paul had suggested earlier, we generally didn't try not to do that in the past, but with this, it's kind of
They
an
can
important
utilize
component.
for the vacancy, the salary savings
Right.
that are generated from those vacancies.
Right.
Not dollar for dollar, but, you know,
Right, there's a limit, you're right.
There's a limit.
The fraction thereof, yeah.
And we will institute the quarterly review with that specific information and deliberate.
there will be a
deliberations
separate
to be
sheet.
done.
There will be a separate sheet, not to call it the fire department, but there'll be a separate sheet for both fire and police. Because police is doing that as well.
And we'll get an automatic update from you?
Every quarter, well, the quarterly reports that come forward that we have to by charter.
Just one comment.
Chief, come on up.
Sorry about that.
Thank you. Just one comment. As a department head, I'm frustrated that I get compared to the other departments because I don't operate like them. So I think it's an unfair evaluation when you look at our overtime versus police, DPW, or anybody else. We work a 24-hour shift schedule. We're not the same as everybody else. We don't work 8 hours. We work a whole different schedule. So I'm okay with all of these controls and all of these everythings, but we need to be compared to us. Don't look at the police department. They don't run like us. Don't look at the highway department. We don't run like them. But if you want to set certain parameters and certain restrictions for our department and view our department individually and not compare to anybody else, that I'm in. But if you're going to continually compare us to other organizations in the town, that's not a fair assessment. That's just my opinion.
And fair enough, but it is, it's a budget that,
And I don't
a line in the
disagree.
budget that's gotten out of control, so.
Again, I think some of the numbers that you're forgetting to understand is the dollars went up because we're contractually obligated to pay more for overtime. See, that number's gonna go up. Like I mentioned offline, we forensically started in July tracking every single overtime reason. Every single reason. Why are you out on overtime? Why are we paying overtime? What's the reason? We gave all of that data to Paul today because he didn't have that level. So I knew in July, after last year's budget, that we were gonna have to forensically look at everything we do. So we went even deeper this year. So every time there's an overtime, we know what it was for. So is it sick time use? Is it vacation? Is it personal? Every single reason, what is it for? So that no one can say we're abusing overtime. And sick time was a comment that was made. Paul and I forensically went through every sick time situation that we could find. There is not an abuse of sick time in our organization. There's no patterns, there's none of that to be found. Same thing with vacation. The averages are what he's got, and that he's been using for the last 20 years. So if somebody thinks that we're overspending on overtime just frivolously, we are not. We're covering what the mandate or what the recommendation was, trying to do 11 for 11. And we've identified that opens is a huge number for us that we never had to calculate before.
So, Chief, I don't dispute anything you're saying, but I went and asked Paul, and I said, I want to see overtime and sick time.
Sure.
And I got hard data sheets,
Yes.
paper,
Yep.
or I can have them PDF. You know how long it would take me to go through this data to confidently say there's no patterns here? And so I know when you sit here and you say, we're not, and I believe that you believe that, I'm just saying it would take me a month to go through this data to figure that out.
I'll sit down every night if that's what you want, Counselor, but I don't believe you're gonna find anything glaring that, truly shows that we're overspending overtime frivolously. And I think that's what, there's a misconception. We're not spending overtime frivolously. We're trying to meet that commitment of 11 for 11. And when, like the town manager said, when somebody has earned time, I have to give them their earned time. I don't have a choice. It's contractually obligated. They get vacation time, I gotta give it to them.
Well,
We've
vacation
instituted a
time,
health policy.
absolutely. That's part of
If
the
you're-
deal. I
if you're
want them to
sick,
use that.
Don't come to work if you're sick. We don't want you. And it's a 24-hour block. It's not like I don't feel well at 8 o'clock this morning, so I'm not gonna come in. Well, I feel better around 6 PM, 7, I'm gonna come in. That doesn't happen. And if it did, I would have a question. Why are you okay now at 7 PM, but you weren't okay at 8 AM? I
Well,
have a
should we
question.
look at the shift changes in the next contract? Is that what we should contemplate?
I
the
don't
10s
know,
and
that's something to
14s,
think
8,
about.
8, and 8?
Absolutely, but, there's a whole host of reasons why the overtime number is what it is. And I appreciate the opportunity to have those savings in the line items for salaries to move to overtime, because I think that's reasonable. I still have to have a firefighter working. I had the savings in line item salaries, so to move it to overtime is, in my opinion, the right way to do business. And I understand the controls, and I'm okay with that.
And not trying to compare you to other departments, but I think for me, right, it's either the fire department starts policing the overtime budget, or you put the council, or at least me, in a position where we have to start thinking about, well, maybe we do need to evaluate shifts on the next contract. And,
Right, that's why when you were questioning overtime last year, I just told you, July 1, we started forensically asking every single overtime slip that is put in, what is the reason?
And
Because I
think
have
that's
to
a great
give you
idea.
an answer
That's the data.
as to why is overtime being used, and I didn't have an answer last year. I only have 6 months worth of data right now, because we just started July 1. But we did not see any abuse of any particular line item category in any particular reason, after a 6-month picture. Now, what we do going forward, I don't know, but all of our staff knows, every single time an overtime ticket puts in, you gotta put a reason why. So that you guys have the right information to make the right decisions going forward. Because you're right, it's not fair if you don't know. And if there is sick time abuse, well, then we need to identify that and correct it. We don't see it yet. That's not to say it's not happening, but we don't see it at this moment in time, given the information that we have and the reports that we're able to generate. We don't see it.
Peter?
Chief, I don't compare you to the police. I understand your job's different. I don't compare you to DPW. I understand your jobs and your requirements are different. What I do question is when I see numbers go up. Just last week, we were having this conversation and, the answer was from you and Paul was, geez, we're not quite sure where this money, what's going on with the overtime. I certainly appreciate your candidacy, you and Paul. You've always, seems to me, struck me to be that way. But I think these are questions we're gonna ask. I think we should ask.
You should.
I think, to me, most noticeably out of the budget is the fire budget is going up quite a bit. And I get it. There's a lot of equipment involved. Everything you wear on your daily basis and your uniforms, your vehicles and stuff, but I think we have to keep asking questions. And I think this is what we've asked to put forward is just, maybe make us feel better, and hopefully we're not back here next year. And if we see this happening, I think maybe we gotta start the process well before budget time on how we want to address this, begin the whole looking into whatever issues there may be. I do think there are some fixes, but I think those might be not, I don't think we could fix them in this current situation. I think there are other fixes that could be addressed. So I'll leave it at that, but, and I don't frankly think that there is rampant sick time abuse in your agency. I think that by contract, everybody's allowed a certain amount of times, and they use them for whatever their reasons are. And it's tough. Somebody calls in sick, I get it. You're not gonna accuse them of not being sick. You're gonna assume that, like you said, and even if you can develop a pattern, you can't necessarily prove it, so. But I just kind of wanted to get that. I see some frustration or hear it in your voice. I understand it. But me personally, it's a matter of just seeing the numbers and asking questions, and I do that to any department.
Again, Counsel, I don't mind at all. I'll take any questions you want. You're right, you have the right to ask any question you want, and I have to provide you an answer. And I don't have to like the answer, and sometimes you might not like them either, but those are the answers. It's just that since I've been here in my 3 years, and I've been here during some of the quarterly reviews of the financial picture, and the finance department throws up the overtime, you can't help but not see the fire department's out of control. But why? And that's why, as of July 1, I wanted to give you answers. What is the overtime going towards? Where does it go? So that you have an answer. So now, again, we have a 6-month window that we're looking at, and we will continue to do that going forward. But to put that on a glaring slide and lump us with everybody else, I don't think is fair. It's not a good representation of what the fire department does. I'm happy with the controls that you're laying out. I think that will be certainly a help for us, and we can certainly get a better picture of what we're doing. And I will continue to provide all the level of detail that we're looking at forensically for overtime, so that Paul knows exactly what we're doing, so that if there's something that doesn't look right, or the numbers start to go askew, why? So we have an answer. But so far from what we've been able to look at, it's been the open positions that are the wild card in our department with the overtime.
And Chief, I'm sorry, Finley. This to me personally it's hard. Public safety, firemen, and any of our departments, I think they're all run well, that we provide good service to the town. But I think there's a board here, we all respect what each of you firefighters do. And I think that makes it harder because, we want to manage a budget, but we don't. We want to try and keep a tax rate, but we don't want to hurt our first responders. And so therein lies a real conflict for us all here. So thanks for letting me have my minute.
I mean, I think we owe it to the taxpayers to have the hard conversations.
Absolutely, understood, truly agree.
Nancy, did you?
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to say, I agree wholeheartedly with what Andy has said. What is happening is unsustainable, and we've seen this for a number of years, so it had to be addressed. And I think that we've heard tonight some of the challenges that I think probably have to be addressed separately at a later time, contribute to what's been happening. I recognize too that even when we're talking just a little bit of an increase, that little bit of increase is compounded by the little bit of increases that I know when the state downshifts costs. I mean, the retirement stuff, the school district, all of those things. So we're trying to figure out what is sustainable. We know what we have is not sustainable, and are trying our best to recognize first responders. I mean, there's no question that we certainly support police and fire and recognize it's a priority need, but it has to somehow to be affordable for people to be here, because as much as we say, okay, we could say 15 firefighters, people say, yeah, that's what we want, but we can't afford it. So, it leads us to the point where we spent a lot of time tonight on this. I have one question though, and I'm sure it's just probably me that doesn't understand, but when we're talking about spending the overtime money because we don't have those positions currently filled, given that overtime is time and a half, is there a point at which the use of that overtime then precludes our ability to hire because we don't have the money to fill those positions anymore? Or am I not understanding that? Okay.
No, like the town manager said,
Yeah.
personnel line item, salary accounts are in that line item.
Okay.
I can't move those dollars.
Okay, so it's
So if
still-
I'm open If firefighter Jones leaves, well, that now just becomes firefighter blank. So that stays in that line. I'm not paying firefighter Jones anymore because he left.
Yeah.
So, but those salary dollars are still there as the weeks go on. When I get to hire firefighter Smith to fill the spot, well, from the time firefighter Jones left to the time firefighter Smith started, those dollars did not get spent. Those are the dollars that we would like to put into the overtime account, because while firefighter Jones was out,
Yeah.
I had to fill overtime for him. So that comes out of the overtime budget, which we don't have right now, because we've never budgeted before, for open positions in the fire department overtime account. We only budgeted for vacation, sick time, personal time, the traditional stuff. So if we're allowed to use some of the personnel line item savings dollars and put it into overtime, that helps recover some of the overtime that we had to spend, but it's not all of it, because it's time and a half out of overtime versus straight time dollars going in.
But it doesn't impact our ability to utilize those personnel funds to hire.
No.
And I think this, the last thing I was gonna say is just a comment. I think this highlights how important it is for us to do whatever we can to recruit. Because if we have the bodies, we won't be using this overtime money. So, you know, I don't know, that may be and I know, I mean, law enforcement across the board is firefighters, I know, but, you know, maybe putting some time into what can we do differently and how can we attract people that, because that will absorb, you know, it will lessen our problem. So, anyway, thank you.
We do recruiting. We are in an active recruit stage right now. The chief has interviewed several candidates. He has some more that he's willing to bring in next week to do a practical test. The problem is we put them on our list, and there's so many openings around us. By the
Sure.
time we pick up the phone and say,
Competition.
hey, oh, okay, thank you, you got another job. So we're back out recruiting again. We can have a list of 5 people. We go through the 5 people.
All the towns
We
do
get
the
down to
same.
number 5, and they're like, yeah, I wish you would have called me 2 days ago because I just accepted a job at XYZ town. So we have to go back out and do it again. And the other thing, the other issue, and I'll just bring it up because you talked about recruiting, is paramedics. It's very difficult for us to look into hiring paramedics right now. We have one that has applied. We're trying to get him up here. He's not from New Hampshire. He wants to come back to this area of the country. Trying to ask him when he's coming back to get the test. He's a paramedic. Everything seems to be in order from the interviews. We just got to put him through the practical test to make sure he can do what he says he can do, and he's fit to be a firefighter, and do some background checks on him and things of that sort. We have tried. We have changed our process to basically it's a running process right now. It's just an open-ended, like our police officers. We have openings, apply. And as soon as we get them, every Friday we send them off to the chief, say, here's your next batch that we got. Get that list going. So we are actively trying to recruit. We're trying to think of different ways to recruit. One issue we see in the state of New Hampshire, and maybe the legislation can help, is the CPAT, right?
Yeah, so there was a CPAT change. One of the hangups that we had, or frustrations, was that every candidate to be a firefighter in the retirement system had to have an active CPAT in order to get a job. Now, the state has changed that rule.
What is a CPAT?
So the CPAT is a test mechanism to ensure that the firefighter can perform all the job functions of a firefighter. So they have to run through certain different stations which simulates job activities on the fire ground. And they have to complete each of the sections within a certain time frame, and then they have to complete all of the sections within that time frame. So it's a whole physical, active testing component. So a lot of candidates don't pass. So then if they don't have a CPAT, we could hire them. But with the rule change, anyone who currently works for a career fire department and has an association with that career fire department, we can laterally transfer them in without worrying about the CPAT. So now that piece of the hiring process has now gone away for some candidates. If we have candidates that have never been on a career department, then they still have to provide a CPAT certificate saying they've met that standard in order to be hired. And that's a New Hampshire retirement system requirement. It's not ours. That's to be in the retirement system, you have to have that.
Nancy?
Can I just ask, so who does that, or how do they
So-
have access to that?
So the state of New Hampshire runs it a few times a year.
At
I know
fire
they're trying to,
standards?
yep.
Yeah.
They're trying to run it more often. But we've also helped candidates. The state of Connecticut runs it very frequently. There were also others across the country. We had one candidate who wanted to work for us, very excited to work for us. He went to Chicago and came back the next day with it in his hand. So there's plenty of opportunities across the country, and we've, lended our hands and information that we have to candidates. So while it's an obstacle, it's not the obstacle. We can help them get around it or get past it.
For paramedics, it's a.
Paramedics have to do the same thing, so even though if we wanted to hire a paramedic, in order to be a Group 2 employee, you have to have that CPAT and firefighter 1, 2. And there are some paramedics, they're not interested in being firefighters, they just enjoy the medical field, and they want to do that job function. But in order to be in our organizations and others like ours, they have to be a firefighter in order to get the full Group 2 firefighter retirement benefits.
Jennifer.
I didn't want to muddy the waters, but when you talked about recruiting, we are recruiting. We just have some
Yeah.
obstacles that we've been trying to run through and jump over.
So some of that discussion kind of reinforces for me that the staffing at 12 option might not really work right now because you're having such a hard time recruiting people.
It might.
To fill those positions.
Look, I guess I'll say it, even though it might jinx my whole system, but I'm excited of the current list that was pushed over to us last Thursday. I think we've got some really good candidates. Right now, I only have one open. So if I had more openings, I could put these people on. I think we're going to end up with some really good people, and I'll make a hard decision on who we're going to hire. The last time we did this, we had a second interview, ranked all our candidates, and we had 2 people that were tied. So we ended up having to hire one, the other one put on a wait list. It was only a month later that we had another open, I called the candidate up and he'd already taken another job. So we're really disappointed that we weren't able to bring that candidate on. Great person, would have fit in our organization, just immense, it would have been a great hire for us, but they go so quickly.
Right.
Which, again, good for the industry, but bad for us as, an employer trying to bring on good people.
I also want to echo what Peter said about appreciation for your department. Councilor Mackenzie Murphy and I spent some time with you going
Yes.
and touring all of the different facilities, and that, I appreciated you before and appreciated everything that you and your department do even more after that, and seeing everything, all your equipment and the staff. So thank you
welcome.
for that.
All right,
We're done with the chief, because I have 3 motions that we need to make.
Yep. Thanks, Chief. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
First motion is to move the general fund capital reserve in the amount of $2,410,000 to the February 13th public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Nancy Murphy,
Second.
second by Jennifer. Any further discussion? All those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed or abstained? 700.
Motion to move wastewater capital reserve fund in the amount of $600,000 to the February 13th public hearing.
So moved.
Motion by Jennifer, second by Nancy Murphy. I'm not even going to look over this side now. All all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed or abstained? 700.
I'm doing all the hard work.
I know, so moved.
Motion to
Anybody
move
can
the
do
town
that.
budget in the amounts of $42,909,979 to the February 13th public hearing.
I'll move it.
Motion by Mackenzie. Second by Andy. Any further discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor of the motion signify by saying aye. Opposed or abstained? 700.
Also, what's the rate though?
I'm getting there.
Where do we, oh, you're getting there. Okay, sorry, I'm just too excited.
I'm getting there, The total. The total appropriations is, for all funds, including capital reserves, is $45,919,979. That's $45,919,979 is what we approved tonight. The tax rate currently is sitting at $4.63 estimated which is an increase of 34 cents from the 2024 tax rate at this time. So we voted on a 5-cent decrease from what I presented in December.
Right.
And that's based on your estimated revenue, not last year's revenue.
That is based on the estimated revenue we put forward. It does not include the ambulance fee discussion.
Okay. Is there anything further for Paul?
And we'll do that discussion on the 13th?
I will try to have it on the 13th.
Okay.
All right. If there's nothing further,
I will just say, I mean, you know, based on the changes we made to the budget tonight, which were very few, and, you know, we had those through and Paul brought them forward, it goes to show how disciplined the departments are putting the budget together. There wasn't a lot of things we found in there that were wants versus needs. So we probably should have said it before everybody left, all the department heads left, but please pass on our appreciation. It makes our jobs easier when you come forward with the lean budget.
Appreciate that. We had that discussion today at staff meeting.
and that has been the habit for a long time. It's, it's been the constant goal. There's always room to cut. It depends what you want to cut and what changes you want to make to the community, and because that's basically what would likely happen. There'd be a wholesale change in certain things, but anyhow.
And I think another thing that needs to be said is, considering all of those things, it's really important to understand that if for some reason a default budget occurs, there will be changes to service. There's just no way around it.
And staffing potentially.
Well,
But
that's
I
service.
mean, yeah.
Yeah.
That's
I mean,
service.
but yeah.
So,
All right.
with all that being said, I motion to adjourn.
Second.
Motion by Nancy Harrington. Yeah, now they're jumping into the game. And seconded by Andy. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, abstained, 700. Thank you, everybody.